Good evening, everybody. It's Mormonism Live, Wednesday, May 13th, 2026. Tonight's episode, Moroni as a treasure guardian. Mr. Radio Free Mormon, how are you this evening?
I'm great, thank you. We were just chatting before the show started about all the wonderful twists and turns tonight's episode will cover.
Yeah, this was something I've been thinking about for a few months. I thought about all of the overlap between the stories around Moroni, and this actually started in the slides are in the show tonight. But I was looking into, again, I can't remember where I did this recently, but had a conversation with you in one of our shows about references to Moroni having bloody clothes and being a throat slit Spaniard. And I found some old documentation of that in various critical sources, newspaper articles, etc. And I was sort of caught off guard by how many of them there were. And I put them online and just said, hey, people, look at, these, multiple sources pointing to Moroni appearing to be somewhat like a treasure digger. And I thought, it'd be an interesting episode because I knew of other things that we'll talk about tonight that overlap these two narratives. And I thought, it would make a great episode for us to go through all of that tonight. And so that's what we're going to do. Any thoughts from you before we jump into the presentation?
Well, what occurs to me right now, and maybe Don Bradley will be watching so he could take this if he hasn't already, which is that if you have an early account of Moroni showing up with his throat slit and bleeding, try and tell me they didn't have the temple endowment, man. Obviously, they did.
Yeah, and he did not keep the secrets that he was asked to covenant to. So not good at all. All right. I hope Don tackles that. So let me grab this.
Just give me credit. That's all I ask.
There you go. Love it. So here's the thumbnail for tonight. Moroni as a treasure guardian, the real pattern behind Joseph Smith's treasure digging. And we'll jump into it.
Did you try to get Moroni to look like Tom Cruise in that slide?
No, but he does have a young Mission Impossible look to him, doesn't he?
Yes, this is Moroni's mission, should you choose to accept it.
Yeah, and the distance he traveled from Mesoamerica to Manti to Palmyra was truly impossible. So,
yes,
with that, we'll jump in here. All right, I wanted to mention two first, the Post-Mormon Celebration Cruise. I just got notified about half an hour ago that some rando, Kobe Reddish, will not be able to attend. He's had to cancel.
Really?
So I'll have to cross him off. Yeah.
That's disappointing.
Yeah, maybe reach out to him. He's got a little problem. If you can solve it, maybe he could still go. So I'll let you reach out to him and see if you can figure that out.
Really? You're talking to me?
Yeah,
Are you talking to me?
I'm talking to you.
Okay, as long as it doesn't involve money going from me to him, maybe I can.
No, I don't think it involves money. I'll just note here, again, we leave on September 13th out of Long Beach. We come back September 20th. It's only 4 months away. We haven't mentioned it in quite a while, though we did mention it Monday on the newscast. A lot of good folks are going that you recognize. And so if you do want to go on the Post-Mormon cruise, if right there at the very bottom, you'll see the URL link to be able to attend that. And I'll also put that in the show notes sometime tonight as well. So once the show's over, it'll be there also. So you can freeze your screen there, push pause, type that into your phone or computer.
Shouldn't Randy Bell have a doctor in front of his name?
We should add Dr. Randy Bell there. So I'll add that. It might be Dr. Charlie Harrell too, for all I know.
Yeah, who knows? We got a lot of smart people going on this cruise.
We do. There's a combined IQ there of about
1,500,000,
I think. So. What was your answer?
It's at 1,000,000.
1,000,000. Yeah. Okay, there we go. Well, let's get going. We'll got a lot to get through tonight.
Yes.
There are tons of quotes. There are places where we will stop and we'll have extended conversation. But for the most part, I really want to look at these from a superficial point of view, just noting sort of the generality, 20,000-foot view. But I'll just note here at the beginning, Moroni as a treasure guardian in Joseph Smith's treasure-seeking world. And you can pause it and read that if you want. But the main thing here is often when it comes to the critics and the apologists discussing Mormonism, we go to the earliest sources, which are usually believing members of the church and their recorded memories of what happened. And the apologists will often discount late sources or critical sources. And that never made sense to me, by the way. The discounting a critical source simply because it's critical. If you only count the people who believe in your story, of course, you're only going to have people who believe in your story. you should weigh just as equally, to some degree, the people who have criticism about the event. If
Mhm.
you're talking about an event that isn't true, then anybody who can lead you to the truth is going to be a critical source of some sort. So, with that, I just want to say that uh, what I think is really important, and you'll see this tonight, is that if there's a late source, if there are multiple late sources, and they're not exactly connected to each other, but they're telling us the same overlapping narrative, and they are the people who associated with Joseph Smith at the earliest time in Mormonism's narrative. Joseph Smith is treasure digging uh, sometime in the year 1819 is when he gets his first seer stone from Sally Chase. 1822, Willard Chase claims he dug up the rock there. That's the egg-shaped stone. We ought to at least hear out those early treasure diggers, Joseph Smith Sr., and others who were associated with Joseph Smith before the Mormon narrative became a religious narrative. In other words, if they talked to Smith earlier than church members talked to Smith, and their story collaborates with each other and tells a very different narrative, maybe we should take that seriously. Any thoughts from you before I skip this slide to the next one?
No, no.
Okay. All right. So I'll just note here, because when you step back into those recollections, not as late fabrications, but as remembered early narratives, the story doesn't initially sound like polished religion. It sounds like treasure digging. What the historical record actually shows is not a simple evolution from treasure ghost to angel, nor a simple either or choice between folklore and theology. Instead, it shows something more complicated and frankly much more interesting. The Moroni story was being told in ways that map directly onto an already familiar treasure-seeking framework. Buried treasure in a hill, a guardian protector, strict ritual conditions, and we'll get to it, by the way. When we get to the rituals that are around how Joseph Smith was to get the gold plates, it seems like such a strange thing to me. And I know we can pick out an Old Testament story here or there, but it's such a strange thing to me that in a God who's trying to call a prophet, have him find gold plates, translate them from Reformed Egyptian into English, he also needs him to ride a certain horse and to wear certain clothes and
Mhm.
to do certain ritual acts. And and then the penalty for not doing the ritual perfectly is that he can be hurt or physically tampered with to some degree, and in one quote at least, destroyed altogether. So I thought that was sort of strange. And please.
You know, other than the observation that the kid in me still thinks this would be exciting and thrilling to be part of, if you believe this is, and it's not just wasted effort going out and digging the countryside up after a hard day's work you've had while the sun was up already. This would be so exciting. But the other thing is this, is that when we look at this, we know first off, they never got any treasure. The main point of the entire expedition, plural, is to get treasure. They never got any, but they did collect a certain number of tales, either to explain why they didn't get treasure or to attest that there really had been treasure there, only it got moved. I found a feather, or we heard it rumbling or whatever. So there is evidence from witnesses that corroborate the reality of the treasure that they never find. And it just strikes me that this ends up being brought into Mormonism, I think, in spades. That we never actually arrive or experience the actual miracle that we're promised, but instead we get scraps from the table that are supposed to suggest to us that it really is true. If you look at the Book of Mormon and Book of Mormon apologetics, right? Few scraps here and there that indicate it's true, whereas obviously it's a product of early 19th century America. Anyway, it's a thought that came to me. There may be some merit to it. I'm not prepared to go into depth on it. What do you think?
Well, the only person who did get anything was the amount of money Joseph Smith got paid over all the treasure digs to be able to look in the hat or with the stone and to tell everybody where the treasure they'll never find is located.
And everybody else got such a pain in their back.
Yeah. And they're digging, they've got calluses, dirty hands. Meanwhile, all he has to do is hold a felt stovetop hat with a rock in the bottom.
And in one account, he's back at the house. He's watching TV in his room. He's in there with the hat, he's not even out there at the digging site.
Yeah, so this will be interesting. Buried treasure in a hill, a guardian protector, strict ritual conditions, a seer using a stone to locate and obtain a hidden object. By the way, one of the sources says that's how Joseph Smith found the plates, was using the seer stone. It had nothing to do with an angel telling him the location, which I thought was interesting too. So I end here with a question. What happens when a religious narrative is built inside a culture that already believes in guarded treasure, seer stones, and ritual retrieval? All right.
Is the answer Mormonism?
Yeah, there it is. All right. So the very first category here is hidden worldly treasures buried in a hill. So this is the treasure digging side of things, and we'll bounce back and forth. This is the treasure digging side of things. And this is the instances where Joseph is being told that, and again, other witnesses or people are hearing from Joseph that there are treasures buried. And I'll just note here that Willard Chase, Peter Ingersoll, and Isaac Hale. And by the way, in Mormonism, we are taught, soon as we hear these stories about Isaac Hale, we are taught immediately to distrust him because Joseph steals his daughter, and all he wants to do is lie and demean and diminish the character of Joseph Smith. But why? Like, why don't we trust the father of Emma Smith maybe more than Joseph Smith?
There's an answer. I can tell you the answer. The answer is because he said negative things about Joseph. That's why we don't trust him as Mormons.
Yeah. So you get Willard Chase, Peter Ingersoll. They're both involved with Joseph Smith in the treasure digging. Isaac Hale is the father of Emma Smith, Emma Hale, Joseph's legal wife, first wife. And I'm only pausing here because I know Isaac Hale's two sons also have some things to say about Joseph as well. But in this instance, Isaac is there in, I believe, what is it, Harmony, Pennsylvania? And he's really close by to sort of Josiah Stoll and is sort of watching that from a bit of a distance. He is tied into the group that's doing the treasure digging there. And he's watching all of this take place. So he has things to say about it too. Chase, again, talks about a great treasure in a hill. Peter Ingersoll talks about where money was hid in the earth, that Joseph could see in a stone. Isaac Hale says that Smith stated to me that he had given up what he called glass looking and that he expected to work hard for a living, but he still continued to look in his stone and pretend to see treasures in the earth. And this isn't going to be new to anybody, but just to note that treasure digging involves digging up a treasure that's buried somewhere. We also have Josiah Stoll from the 1826 glass-looking trial. We get Joseph Knight Sr., who, if we remember right, he's the one who's living with the Smiths when Joseph finally goes out to get the plates. And I think it's actually his horse that Joseph Smith borrows. And then you've got Abner Cole, who, under the pseudonym of Obadiah Dogberry, was going in at night to the Grandin print shop, stealing pages from that shop of the Book of Mormon and then reprinting them in the newspaper so that readers wouldn't have to buy the Book of Mormon. They could just read the advanced copy day to day in the newspaper, which I thought was kind of a funny thing. But what people maybe don't know, that story maybe is familiar to most Mormons who have been aware of church history. But also, if you go read Dan Vogel's dialogue paper on the 14 treasure digging sites in Joseph Smith's treasure digging, Abner Cole is involved in 2 or 3 of those treasure digs. So he is not just this critic from afar who's stealing Joseph Smith's Book of Mormon pages, but he's also rubbing shoulders with Joseph Smith, Hiram Smith, I think Alvin in one case, Joseph Smith Sr., and he is doing some of these treasure digs right alongside the Smith family.
There are at least some of your statements where people who are on the digs, they're involved, but it's like, now that I'm giving a statement, I didn't really think it would work. They kept asking me. So finally I went along out of curiosity. Nobody wants to fess up.
Yeah. Hindsight's 2020. Yeah. So Josiah Stoll here prisoner had a certain stone by which he could discover hidden treasures, that he threw the stone and described the locality of the money, that it was underground. That he was employed by him to look for a mine, that he went to digging but never succeeded in finding any. Joseph Knight, he had a stone and he would look in it and tell where there was money hid, but could not get it. We went to digging, but nothing came of it. Abner Cole, he pretended to have an intercourse with spirits by whom he was informed where money was concealed in the earth and that he had been engaged in digging for it. So again, all of these folks are indicating that treasure digging obviously involves treasure buried in hills. And we've got a few more here. Lucy Mack Smith, Joseph's mother, in the family history, the progenitors of the Smith family, and Joseph Smith the prophet. Though it's sort of seen as a biography of Joseph, but Lucy titled it in such a way as to at least on some level include it being a biography of extended family as well. And she says he, Joseph Sr., was very much excited upon the subject of discovering hidden treasures. And Joseph possessed a certain key by which he could discern things invisible to the natural eye. Henry Harris, who I'd never heard of before, but he puts an affidavit in 1833. I assume this is in Mormonism Unveiled. But he said that he had a stone and he could see in it where money was hid in the earth and that he had been digging for it. And then William Stafford, who will get to read a lot from his affidavit later, he, Joseph, told me that there was money hid in a certain place and that he could see it in a stone. He went to digging for it, but it slipped away.
By the way, when we compare Lucy Mack Smith's statement to all the other statements, we now can understand, I think, with a high degree of certainty, that when she talks about Joseph possessing a certain key, she's talking about his seer stone.
Yeah, I think when you come to that source alone, you might see the word key as being interpreted as gift, just a general gift of being able to do something.
Mm-hmm.
But I think you're right. I think because all these other instances mention the stone, that's also what she wants to mention. But I want to note here, I think it's, by the way, really a big deal. There comes a moment where Joseph Smith and everyone around him is very comfortable saying seer stone. And then there comes a moment where that no longer is what we want to talk about. That object we need to be distanced from it. And so it somehow transforms into Nephite spectacles. Again, if you believe the spectacles were in the box, but Joseph doesn't need to use them, but he instead uses the stone, then kudos to you. But at some point, people are not comfortable saying either seer stone or Nephite spectacles, and they create a general term of Urim and Thummim to point to a religious term and to distance the concept from both the seer stone and the Nephite spectacles, leaving everybody to figure out what it means in their own head.
And my recollection is it was William W. Phelps that we can look to for the first recorded and preserved instance of referring to the Nephite spectacles as Urim and Thummim, which I think was in 1833.
I was going to say 33 as well, so I think you're right. And I was going to say, when you said his name, Phelps, I was like, yep, that's the guy. So I think you hit it on the head. And again, by 1833, it is transitioning or has transitioned to a completely religious story. 1833 and earlier were often, or at least even if the account is 1840s or later, if the person that's talking is somebody who worked alongside Smith in the treasure digging in the late 1820s or the early 1830s, it's often a treasure digging narrative. So somewhere along the way, there's a transition made. Okay. So again, treasure digging involves treasures in a hill. Well, so does the gold plates. We all know the story. While he was, again, this is Joseph Smith's history. While he was conversing with me about the plates, the vision was open to my mind and I could see the place where the plates were deposited. And that so clearly and distinctly, I knew the place again when I visited. By the way, these two images are the LDS Church's images. They've created some video and photography of them acting out these Book of Mormon scenes, both Joseph Smith finding the plates as well as the actual narrative of the Book of Mormon. And these two images come from there.
I'm glad they made the box big enough to hold more than just the plates.
Yeah, that I don't think it'd be kind of hard for a sword to fit in there, wouldn't it?
Very hard. It has to be a big box. And then you get in trouble with the stone that Joseph has to move. Even though he uses a lever, it's approaching the size of a VW Volkswagen Beetle.
Yeah, yeah. So there's that. Uh, anyway, I'd love to know when Moroni put that in the ground and how he got there. But
What lever did he use?
yeah,
And
yeah.
he had to be an old man by then because, he came all the way up from southern Mexico.
With a pretty heavy backpack. All right, let's see here. He says, I obeyed. I returned to my father in the field and rehearsed the whole matter to him. He replied to me that it was of God. How many times do you think his family told him over all these stories? Oh, Joseph, that's of God. You ought to go and do it. So he replied to me that it was of God. He told me to go and do as commanded by the messenger. I left the field and went to the place where the messenger had told me the plates were deposited. And you said this before the show started, and owing to the distinctness of the vision, which I had concerning it, I knew the place the instant I had arrived there.
So here's the deal. That doesn't even pass the smell test. This is a made up story. And here's why I think that. First off, how do you know which direction to go? You've got a vision that shows you a place on a hill, apparently, very crystal clear, right? It's like high def. But how do you know where that hill is, the direction to get there? I mean, you know where the hills are in your locality, right? And then once you get to the hill, here's my question. Doesn't every part of the hill look pretty much like every other part of the hill? And does he have to actually go all around the hill, every part of it, before he finds the part that exactly matches the vision he received?
And how many times had he been to that hill before that would give him the kind of familiarity if he truly was able to pick the spot out immediately?
Yeah, and he doesn't say, oh, I recognize this. I realized this place because I've been over on that hill before. It's no, I knew the place the instant that I arrived there. So he doesn't know the place until he gets there on the hill.
Yeah. Isn't that convenient? Well, also convenient is to the village of Manchester, Ontario County, New York, stands a hill of considerable size and the most elevated of any in the neighborhood. On the west side of this hill, not far from the top. So the other thing too is, as you point out, RFM, it's one thing to get to the base of the hill and there's the spot. He has to go to the top of the hill. He has to walk across the hill, and it is a big hill. And what's the difference from one tree to the next, or one barren piece of ground to the next barren piece of ground?
And I'm guessing he had to approach it from the right angle, the same angle that the vision came to him in.
Yeah. Yeah. And the most elevated of any in the neighborhood, on the west side of this hill, not far from the top, under a stone of considerable size, lay the plates, deposited in a stone box. This stone was thick and rounding in the middle on the upper side and thinner towards the edges, so that the middle part of it was visible above the ground, but the edge all around was covered with earth. Joseph Smith's history.
Just like a VW Beetle. By the way, if I take this one step further, and having identified this as likely a made-up story, the question then becomes, is there a real story lurking underneath this made-up story that the made-up story is supposed to occlude? And I think that we have it from William W. Phelps in the 1831 letter he wrote, which is basically that Martin Harris and Joseph Smith were out there on this hill. They were doing treasure digs, multiple treasure digs. And then they finally find the gold plates as part of a treasure dig, not as an angel appearing and showing Joseph the place where the plates are.
Yeah. And I'll note here so after this slide, we'll go into the next category. And so I want the audience to, if you want to keep track with me, that'd be great. This will be the first overlapping similarity. I don't think it's that giant of a deal, but when we start adding up 5, 6, 7 of these, I think it becomes more interesting. If there are any similarities between treasure digging and Joseph Smith's religious narrative about Moroni and the gold plates that we don't touch on tonight, I would really love it as the audience if you would put into the chat tonight, live chat, or the comments down below if you're watching this after the fact, put down there any similarities that we missed tonight. I would really be interested in that. The next slide here is the value of worldly treasures. And so this becomes, again, part of the treasure digging narrative, is that you're digging something up that has some worth to it. You're trying to get economic gain. You're looking for a tangible object of value. It's some sort of either gold or silver. Often they use the word money, which I'm going to assume is some sort of metal coinage that they thought came again from either Spaniards who stopped here and buried it, or Native Americans who some of the stories reference a Native American guardian spirit. So some sort of Native American treasure, but it may also involve sort of artifacts as well. Again, you mentioned the feather earlier, which doesn't have any value, but which those digging thought was a sign that they were digging in the right place, because Smith told them that there was a feather buried, and that would be a sign that they were in the right place where the treasure was.
I think that if I'm recalling correctly, the treasure chest was on top of a feather or something like that. And they didn't find the chest, but they found the feather because the chest moved, and Joseph Smith palmed a feather and reached down and pretended he was pulling it out of the earth. Anybody can do this at a kid's party, for crying out loud. And he says, "Look, I found the feather." Oh my gosh, there must have been the whole treasure chest was right here.
That's an easier trick than pulling a coin out of a child's ear.
Yes, it is actually.
Yes. All right, let's talk about these. So again, we get William Stafford, we get Martin Harris, and we get Joseph Smith. RFM, would you mind reading actually three quotes on the left, and I'll take the Joseph Smith one on the right.
I'm going to give it my best. William Stafford, this is from 1853. He was a neighbor who participated in treasure digs with the Smith family. And I say 53 because there is a 33 statement from him, which he wrote for Edie Howe, I think, Eber D. He says a great part of their time, the Smiths, was devoted to digging for money. They would say, for instance, that in such a place, in such a hill, on a certain man's farm, there were deposited keys, barrels, and hogsheads. This says heapsheads. It's hogsheads, which is a big barrel. Hogsheads of coined silver and gold. Bars of gold, golden images. Brass kettles filled with gold and silver. Gold and silver, silver and gold. Gold candlesticks, swords, and etc. And then he says this critical part from the same statement. Joseph Jr. could see by placing a stone of singular appearance in his hat, large gold bars, and silver plates. He could also discover the spirits in whose charge these treasures were, clothed in ancient dress. And then Martin Harris, in an 1859 interview, says this: there was a company there in that neighborhood who were digging for money supposed to have been hidden by the ancients. Now, I don't know, does Martin Harris ever cop to the fact that Joseph Smith was in the thick of this company?
I don't know. My brain tells me, again, I think it was an episode we did not too long ago, 6 months ago or so. Maybe it was the episode we did on Martin Harris as one of the witnesses to the Book of Mormon, but there are moments where he isn't exactly believing of Smith. And if I remember right, there was one reference to Smith being a money digger or treasure digger in that. The Joseph Smith one, in the month of October 1825, I hired with an old gentleman by the name of Josiah Stoll, who lived in, I'm going to pronounce this wrong, but Shenango County, state of New York. He had heard something of a silver mine having been opened by the Spaniards in Harmony, Susquehanna County, state of Pennsylvania, and had, previous to my hiring to him, been digging in order, if possible, to discover the mine. After I went to live with him, he took me with the rest of his hands to dig for the silver mine, at which I continued to work for nearly a month without success in our undertaking. And finally, I prevailed with the old gentleman to cease digging after it. Hence arose the very prevalent story of my having been a money digger. Joseph wants this story alone to be his whole money digging career.
Right.
And again, once you read Dan Vogel's article from Dialogue, it becomes crystal clear that Joseph Smith was digging for years on multiple expeditions before the Josiah Stoll event, and even digs treasure long after this event as well.
By the way, I looked up the interview in Tiffany's magazine, 1859, Martin Harris. Yes, he does mention the stone and Joseph's misuse of it. In fact, this is not the beginning of the sentence. It starts with when Joseph found his stone. When Joseph found this stone, comma, there was a company there in that neighborhood. So yeah, he does definitely talk about it there.
And we've mentioned this before, but it does strike me as maybe members of the audience who have not heard this. there's this idea in apologetics that Joseph Smith is using the Nephite interpreters, the spectacles, early on in the translation, and at some point switches over. But the difficulty that runs into is that the 116 pages, which are the very beginning of the translation of the gold plates, is only done by Martin Harris and, well, maybe Emma as well. But Martin Harris does not participate in the translation at all after the 116 pages. And Martin Harris tells us a story of a time when he switched out Joseph's seer stone with a rock by the river. And when they got back to the house, Joseph looks in the hat and says, "Martin, what's wrong? All is dark as Egypt." And essentially says, "I'm not going to be able to translate." So we know that Joseph is using the seer stone in the translation of the 116 pages. And because there are references about how the spectacles hurt his eyes, we can surmise that the entire 531 pages of the Book of Mormon was translated, in fact, with the seer stone, the rock, and the hat.
Yeah, the story I like the best. We all know about finding the pin, right? And Joseph Smith can find the pin by putting the seer stone in the hat, and then, oh, here's the pin right over here. We know that one, right? But the one that I really love is where, according to Martin Harris, Joseph Smith, he has a seer stone, right? And in order to demonstrate the fact that the seer stone works, Joseph Smith challenged him to a race. And the idea was that Joseph Smith would bind the seer stone to his eyes. So it's one stone and two eyes. Doesn't explain how that works. But he would bind the seer stone to his eyes, and he challenged Martin Harris that he would then run a race with him through the woods.
Yeah, by the way, if you place a stone in the middle of your head, right where your eyes are, on the bridge of your nose, and you put a cloth over,
Mhm.
you have pushed out the cloth far enough that you will be able to see at least a little bit underneath the cloth that is tying the stone to your head.
Well, hopefully it's gauzy, because otherwise you got trees coming up right and left, and you're going to be running right into them.
Yeah. The only magic that worked was magic that had nothing to do with the treasures buried in the earth or actual yeah, anyway, just everything, every magic trick Joseph does that has any level of success is finding the feather under the treasure chest, but not the chest itself.
Finding the
Finding a,
pin.
finding a needle or pin dropped in a pile of straw
Yes.
when Smith is standing there when the needle is dropped. And I think, and he tells Josiah Stoll what his farm looked like
Hmm.
before he had seen it.
It's amazing, really.
Yeah, and these are all the parlor tricks that Joseph did.
And this is what I was talking about originally. Thank you for bringing that up again. Yeah, this is what we get. We get scraps from the table to show how amazing this really is, but we never get to see the amazing thing itself.
No, it's as if we saw all of it as a city through a mountain.
And the reason why we never get to see the amazing thing itself is because when we finally get to the point and that curtain gets pulled back, we see it is not the amazing Oz. It is just a person.
Yeah, just ordinary. Ordinary with a lot of scandal and deception. I'll just note here, my point here in this section is that on one hand, Joseph Smith's treasure digging involves Joseph telling people that there is Spanish silver mines buried in the ground. There is Native American treasures or artifacts that are of value that are in the ground. Again, some reference just the word money being in the ground. You saw Stafford there mention gold candlesticks and swords, brass kettles filled with gold and silver.
Can I just say, I'm not an expert on this, but I really do think that the Americans at the time would be linking these not with Native Americans, but with Europeans who had come over and shipwrecked. And maybe pirates had looted it from somebody else and then buried it and then killed somebody in order for them to become the treasure guardian and keep people from finding the treasure. And then they go off and they get lost. And so hundreds of years later, these people can find it or whatever. But it does seem to be very much, I think, European oriented, unless they thought that Native Americans made these kinds of things, gold candlesticks and swords.
Yeah. At 47 years old, almost 48 years old, I've learned after, again, when I was a little kid, I loved the treasure stories and lots of TV shows and movies played on treasure maps and finding them. At my age now, I realize that essentially every single treasure story I've ever heard about or come across has never actually revealed any hidden treasure. Yeah. Okay. The value of the gold plates. Now, here, I think this is interesting, right? Joseph Smith chose, or if you want to believe the faithful side of it, there is a religious narrative that instead of being written on some other product, Joseph Smith chooses to, or Moroni and the Nephites and the Lamanites, they choose to write their religious history down on what Moroni called gold plates. Now, we can argue what kind of gold that is. It's always seemed strange to me that the story originates with you having to have this extra entertaining piece of the narrative, which is not only do we get this saved religious narrative, but we get it on valuable plates that the early characters, namely Joseph Smith, have to beware of their greed, have to be careful of their greed, so as not to want to use the plates for something other than what they're to be used for. In other words, the material that the story is written on to begin with already has this facet of being tempting to the treasure digger to not utilize it for getting financial gain.
I think perhaps the gold plates themselves are, in a sense, this missing link between the supernatural treasure digging stuff and becoming more of a legitimate type of Christian restoration religion, because you have the fullness of the gospel of Jesus Christ, or whatever it was they thought that was on the plates at the time. But it's mixed with the gold. It's on the gold, and the gold is the treasure dig. But on the gold is the gospel. So here we've got this bridge, I think, of sorts.
Yeah, and I'm going to get off in the weeds here, but it's interesting on this picture. This is what I think is the best replica that tries to stay honest to the descriptions of what the gold plates looked like. And you have the 2/3 section there that is sealed. And remember, I just want to note to the audience that the claim is that entire sealed section is all the writings of Moroni Moriankimer, the brother of Jared, who records all the history of like mankind, essentially, from the very beginning to Christ's coming, tons of revelation and prophecies, all the history behind him. That translated, I think, would be longer than the Bible itself. Just the writings of Moroni Moriankimer.
Well, he was quite prolix. And I think that this was supposed to be the vision of all. That's referred to in Isaiah 29. He had the vision of all and wrote it all down. And boy, there was a lot.
It took like 1,000 years for all the other authors of the Book of Mormon, because it was so difficult. Remember how difficult it was to inscribe these characters on those plates.
Yes.
It took 1,000 years for them to cover the other material there, 600 BC to 421 AD. Meanwhile, Moroni Moriankimer had enough time in his life to just scratch away at these things. It's so interesting to me, the stories that we don't really think about with a critical eye, that we just take for granted when we're a believer.
That is such a detailed vision of all things. I might be in the sealed portion.
You and I might be in there. All right, the value of the plates. Joseph Smith, I'll read the ones here. I'll just read one of them. You pick one on the right that you want to read. I'll read one on the left. I'll just read Joseph Smith's one. Again, Smith tells us, and the people he interacted with tell us, that the gold plates had value, and that was part of this whole process, was that Joseph was told by Moroni he had to prepare himself to not be motivated to take advantage of the value of the plates. So Smith, in his 1832 history, I had been in transgression and had not kept the commandments of God. Therefore, I was left to temptation and sought to obtain the plates that I might obtain riches. So even as he's talking to an angel and he has to restore the true church and God has a mission for him, he's in the back of his head going like, how do I work around this angel guy and take these plates to the local refiner and get some money for them?
It's a crazy narrative. I think it makes more sense the way I view it now, which is Joseph Smith is creating stories, common tropes about why it is you don't get the treasure you're after because you didn't follow the detailed directions exactly what you have to do with exactness. By the way, you have to follow the commandments with exactness. And so he's making up stories to explain why it is that it took so freaking long for him to obtain the plates. 4 years.
It also gives him a reason to not let other people see it. If you saw this, if you'd see this gold, you'd be tempted like I was tempted.
Mm.
So I need to keep this away from you. I need to hide it in the barn. I need to put it underneath the fireplace hearth. You cannot even see this thing because you'll never stop bugging me if you get to see it. Do you like any of the quotes on the right?
Lucy Mack Smith. Well, you have, he, the messenger. The messenger told him, Joseph Smith Jr., this is his mom writing, that he must not lay the plates down. This is the first time he meets him. Don't lay the plates down, Joseph, and don't look behind you. And that if you do that, you won't obtain them. These are the kind of directions that you get from a guardian spirit. Why? So that you can inadvertently violate them and you don't get the treasure. This is like the skit from The Life of Brian, Jehovah, Jehovah, Jehovah. Because someone keeps inadvertently saying Jehovah, and then they start getting stoned. That's the whole joke. But this is the same kind of thing. You inadvertently violate the commandment that was just given to you not to do, so you don't get the gold plates, and you have to come back. Not next week, not in a month, in a whole year, because it apparently has to be on that same equinox.
My gut tells me this narrative doesn't get told until Joseph comes back from the hill. This was a way to explain to his family why it was going to take more time to fabricate the object that would appear to be plates under a cloth.
Yes.
By the way, it took exponentially more time to fabricate those plates than he originally thought it would. Okay, so point here being is that there are multiple references from multiple witnesses, trusted sources, by the way, Joseph Smith, Joseph Knight, Lucy Mack Smith, all believing witnesses to the restoration, all tell us that for all intents and purposes, the gold plates acted in the same way that the treasure with the treasure digging did, in that it's some precious metal that has significant value. And again, at least in the early years, that Joseph Smith isn't allowed to have.
Can I just throw in here that Dan Vogel had posited the idea that Joseph Smith came up with the idea of there being gold plates that the Book of Mormon was written on was to signify its increased value over the Bible, which was written essentially the Nephite Bible on brass plates.
I think that's quite interesting. Yes, by the way, making the material gold increases, if not their value over the Bible for sure, but just increases the value of this project. This project is so important that rather than get whatever that amount of gold would be worth, instead we have to set our egotistical motivations aside, and we have to bring forth this religious narrative, which is of more worth than the financial value of this heap of gold.
He would have had a lot less trouble if he had just said they were written on, I don't know, birch bark scrolls or something.
Yeah, that would have worked. Okay, so the value of gold plates, again, a couple other quotes. Harris openly connects the value in End Temptation. Joseph said the angel told him that he must not get the plates for the purpose of making money, that if he did, he would be destroyed. William Smith, the prophet's brother, we suppose the plates were of great value from their appearance and from what Joseph Smith had said. So you get this idea that they are of significant value. Just the same as the treasures in the treasure digging. So now we get to this next section, which is the treasure digging rituals. And I think this is where, being on gold plates, we Mormons have been trained to see that story and to believe it. The fact that it's buried in a hill is not going to be surprising to us. All treasures and folklore are buried in hills. So that similarity doesn't seem overly striking. But this is where, to me, it starts to get interesting, in that there are rituals around the treasure digging, and then we'll come to find that there are rituals around how Joseph Smith is to get those gold plates. And so the first source here is from Mormonism Unveiled. Again, this is written by Eber D. Howe, and he sends out Philasterus Hurlbut to collect affidavits. And there's a whole bunch. I think if any Latter-day Saint Mormon or doubting Mormon or post-Mormon is out there who's interested in history, you should not exit this life without sitting down and reading the entirety of Mormonism Unveiled. I think it is one of the most precious historical sources in Mormonism, whether you believe all the stories or not. The fact that there are so many different affidavits and newspaper pieces and historical references to what the early characters in Mormonism were saying about Joseph Smith, about the restoration, about the church that he founded. I would not, if you enjoy Mormon history, you really should take the time to read this book. So there's that. Okay. I'm gonna let you read this, Arif, and this is one of those places where I want to take my time for a second and go through this. Let me just double check the next slide as well. Yeah, so this will be a few pages, but let's go through this right here. So I'll have you read this page and I'll read the next one.
Okay, so this is from 1833 from that book that you just mentioned. I, William Stafford, having been called upon to give a true statement of my knowledge concerning the character and conduct of the family of Smiths, known to the world as the founders of the Mormon sect, do say that I first became acquainted with Joseph Sr. and his family in the year 1820. They lived at that time in Palmyra, about 1.5 miles from my residence. A great part of their time was devoted to digging for money, especially in the nighttime when they said the money could be most easily obtained. I have heard them tell marvelous tales.
By the way,
Yes,
this is a similarity I don't have later, but what time of day does Joseph Smith and Emma go to get the plates?
the dark time.
Yeah. Another similarity between the treasure digging often being done at night and the going to get the gold plates was also at the dark of night.
Every year. At least that's how the story goes. I have heard them tell marvelous tales respecting the discoveries they had made in their peculiar occupation of money digging. They would say, for instance, that in such a place, in such a hill, we read this, on a certain man's farm, there were deposited keys, barrels, and hogsheads. That's how I knew it was hogsheads of coins, silver, and gold, bars of gold, golden images, brass kettles filled with gold and silver. They dug greedily and too deep. Gold candlesticks, swords, etc. They would say also that nearly all the hills in this part of New York were thrown up by human hands, and in them were large caves. That sounds familiar, about the cave that somebody reported seeing. Was it Oliver Cowdery or Brigham Young? There's a connection there about this cave opening up into the hill Cumorah and walking in and seeing all the plates and all the treasures and the sword on the table, Laban's sword. The connections are remarkable. And in them were large caves, etc., which Joseph Jr. could see by placing a stone of singular appearance in his hat in such a manner as to exclude all light. Once again, the darkness is important. At which time they pretended he could see all things within and under the earth. Wait a second. He pretended he could see all things within and under the earth. Isn't that what's going to happen with the earth when it becomes celestialized and it becomes a Urim and Thummim?
Say
And
more.
all those who inherit section 131 or 130. And all those who inherit it will be able to look down into it and see all things pertaining to inferior kingdoms. So, but with his stone, he can do this. That he could see within the above mentioned caves, the stone that you get in the celestial kingdom, you look in, you can see things pertaining to superior kingdoms. Large gold bars. Okay, that he could see within the above mentioned caves, large gold bars and silver plates. That he could also discover the spirits in whose charge these treasures were, clothed in ancient dress. At certain times, these treasures could be obtained very easily. Yeah, when was that? At others, the obtaining of them was difficult. The facility of approaching them depended in a great measure on the state of the moon. New moon and Good Friday, I believe, were regarded as the most favorable times for obtaining these treasures. New moon is, of course, when there is no moon in the sky all night long. So it is the darkest night. When there are no clouds is when it's a new moon, because you don't have any moonlight. But Good Friday, that's interesting. These tales I regarded as visionary. However, okay,
By the way-
these tales I regarded as visionary. Go ahead, you go.
Yeah, I just want to note, he's noting that the time you would do these digs had a special meaning in terms of time of the year, new moon and that kind of thing. That the treasure digger would look for certain times of year, that in the astronomy of the universe, that these were the moments when things could be more easily retrieved. And I only note that because we often hear reference to September 22nd being the autumnal equinox, which seems to me to be of value in sort of the same way.
I think so. And once again, I'm not an expert, but Good Friday is famous, among other things, for commemorating the crucifixion of Jesus Christ, but also for the darkness that enveloped the earth for 3 hours. These tales, now this is the part I was talking about. Okay, these tales I regarded as visionary, says William Stafford. However, being prompted by curiosity, I at length accepted of their invitations to join them in their nocturnal excursions. I will now relate a few incidents attending these excursions.
Joseph Smith Sr. came to me one night and told me that Joseph Jr. had been looking in his glass. Now, again, his first seer stone, we were told, was a white translucent seer stone. The second one is an egg-shaped, brown and black striped. So it appears as though what's being referenced here is that first seer stone that he allegedly got when using Sally Chase's green seer stone to find it. So looking in his glass and had seen not many rods from his house. By the way, how long is a rod, RFM?
16.5 feet, Bill. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, no worries. 16.5 feet. So some not many rods from his house, 2 or 3 kegs of gold and silver, some feet under the surface of the earth, and that none others but the elder Joseph and myself could get them. I accordingly consented to go, and early in the evening repaired to the place of deposit.
By the way, once again, we have this idea being repeated that there are designated people that are the only people that can get the treasure.
Yes, we will find that. By the way, thank you. Both in the treasure digging as well as in the Joseph Smith story about the gold plates in Moroni, there are special designated people who must be brought along if the treasure is to be retrieved.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I accordingly consented to go, and early in the evening repaired to the place of deposit. Joseph Sr. first made a circle 12 or 14 feet in diameter. This circle, said he, contains the treasure. By the way, it strikes me that it doesn't take much for Joseph Sr. and Joseph Jr. to be in cahoots. Joseph comes to the home with Stafford there and goes, I need you both to go. I won't be able to get the treasure unless you two go with me. Hey, Dad, the Spirit tells me that you'll know where the treasure is. And Joseph Sr. goes, this is where it is. And, you know, it doesn't take much for Stafford to go like, wow, like they didn't even talk to each other. And one has found the treasure and the other one knows where it's at. And much of this adventure of treasure digging is designed in such a way as to grab the attention of and be entertaining to the others who are along for the ride, who are either going to pay or at least expend their time and energy to dig for the treasure.
I'll bet Joseph Sr. knew the place where the treasure was buried immediately upon getting there.
Yeah, just like the Joseph Smith gold plate story, huh? I need to make sure I make a note of those. I'm trying to keep a running list of all the similarities. Joseph Sr. first made a circle 12 or 14 feet in diameter. This circle, he said, contains the treasure. He then stuck in the ground a row of witch hazel sticks, which Smith Sr. was famous for, around the said circle. He just happened to, all right, there's a hazel tree. Let me go make some hazel witching rods, and we'll put them all around the circle. Within this circle, he made another of about 8 or 10 feet in diameter. He walked around it 3 times on the periphery of this last circle, muttering something to himself, which I could not understand. He next stuck a steel rod in the center of the circles. I didn't know there were just steel rods laying around. So he's
Oh, I think the thing I have in my head is he's carrying all this.
Mhm,
This is part of
mhm.
the equipment, the
Yep.
baggage
Yeah.
for a successful treasure hunt.
Yeah, this is the excavating equipment one brings on a treasure dig.
I bet that Senior didn't bring it all himself. I got a feeling Stafford was toting a lot of it.
He probably is the strongest of the 3, and
That's why it took 2 people.
he did the heavy lifting. All right, let's see here. He next stuck a steel rod in the center of the circles and enjoined profound silence upon us, lest we should arouse the evil spirit who had charge of these treasures. After we had dug a trench about 5 feet in depth around the rod, the old man, by signs and motion, asked leave of absence and went to the house to inquire of young Joseph the cause of our disappointment. So so did Junior not go with them on this? Did he
No,
stay
he's
back?
back at the house watching TV, like I said.
Uh, he soon returned and said Joseph had remained all this time in the house, looking in his stone and watching the motions of the evil spirit.
Mhm.
I bet that's not what Smith was doing. That he saw the spirit come up to the ring, and as soon as it beheld the cone, which we had formed around the rod, it caused the money to sink.
The cone, I'm getting the idea is that when you're digging around the rod in the circle, you're digging a bit in. So maybe
Yeah.
that's the cone.
We then went into the house, and the old man observed that we had made a mistake in the commencement of the operation. If it had not been for that, said he, we should have got the money.
Dang it.
At another time, they devised a scheme by which they might satiate their hunger with the mutton of one of my sheep.
You know what the mistake was that they made at the beginning of this? It doesn't say, but I know what it was. It was going out into the freaking woods and starting to dig in the first place. It was listening to Joseph Smith. That was the mistake they made.
Yeah, it all started there, didn't it?
Yeah. It was a mistake I made.
They had seen in my flock of sheep a large, fat, black wether. By the way, what color was the horse that Joseph Smith took up on
Black.
the night? Yeah. There are several mentions of black sheep being sacrificed. Joseph was told by Moroni that it had to be a black horse.
Yes, and a black weather. He spells it like the weather. I don't know how it was spelled then. Today it's without the A. It's just Wether. It's a castrated male, kept primarily for wool.
Old Joseph and one of the boys came to me one day and said that Joseph Jr. had discovered some very remarkable and valuable treasures which could be procured only in one way. And I'm going to let you read the next slide, but that way was as follows.
That a black sheep, looking strangely similar to the one you happen to have, that a black sheep should be taken onto the ground when the treasures were onto the ground where the treasures were concealed. You see, this is a difficult spirit. It's not it's protecting the treasure too well. The normal incantations are not doing the trick, so we have to up the ante on the sacrifice. And we've got to get to some blood sacrifice now. It's just a sheep, it's not a human being. Don't get excited. Then after cutting its throat, it should be led around a circle while bleeding. So we're going to have blood all the way around this magic circle as well. This being done, the wrath of the evil spirits would be appeased. Nothing an evil spirits likes more than sheep blood. The treasures could then be obtained, and my share of them was to be fourfold. Hell yeah, you can have my sheep. To gratify my curiosity, I let them have a large fat sheep. Okay, come on. I'm calling BS on this. You did not give them one of your large fat sheep just to gratify your curiosity. You were buying into this. They afterwards informed me that the sheep was killed pursuant to commandment, but as there was some mistake in the process, it did not have the desired effect. It was the same mistake. I'm telling you what it is. It's listening to Joseph in the verse was. This, I believe, is the only time they ever made money digging a profitable business. They, however, had around them constantly a worthless gang whose employment it was to dig money nights, and who daytimes had more to do with mutton than money. That's a nice line. It's a nice turn of phrase. When
What
they,
is he,
yes,
what does he mean when he says that this was the only time they ever made money digging a profitable business?
they got a sheep out of it. They
But
got
they
mutton
killed,
out of it.
oh, okay, okay, they killed it and got mutton.
Yes.
so
Usually they got nuttin. This night they got mutton. Better mutton than nuttin.
so the animal sacrifice, you bring a stranger into the ordeal, you tell them that one of their animals have to be sacrificed. All this stuff gets done at night so that all day long you don't have to work and you can sit around and just eat sheep meat.
Yes, I'm getting mutton for Christmas. Should I go on?
Yeah, please.
When they found that the people of this vicinity would no longer put any faith in their schemes for digging money, they then pretended to find a gold Bible, of which they said the Book of Mormon was only an introduction. Now, this is interesting because if this is correct, this reminiscence, I mean, it's only 1833. It's not like it's that long afterward. And it's a person who was definitely there and in a position to know certain things in the neighborhood of the Smiths and Joseph, of which they said the Book of Mormon was only an introduction. Can I just go to this next part?
Well, I was going to, oh, yeah, please do.
Because the Book of Mormon seems to contemplate an idea similar to that. And this is the famous part, 2 Nephi 28:29. Woe be unto him that shall say, we have received the word of God, and we need no more of the word of God, for we have enough. And then toward the end of verse 30, for unto him that receiveth, I will give more.
Excellent. And the slide that we just went over, that's okay. The slide we just went over, we're not going to read that right part. I made that smaller just to show the ending that William Stafford swore this testimony in front of the judge of Wayne County Court. Strangely enough, I don't think the Honorable P. Baldwin knows how to spell Wayne in Wayne County. I believe there's a Y there after the A. So even the smartest among us sometimes have grammar problems. So there's that.
And this is the printer, I think. This has to be chalked up to the printer who laid the type.
Let's blame him. I do think your point is very interesting that both in the treasure digging stories, where William Stafford is making mention here of the end about what he knew of the narrative behind finding the gold plates that would become the Book of Mormon, that Smith, or somehow it's conveyed to Stafford that this is only the beginning of a much larger project. And as you point out in 2 Nephi 28, there is an indication there that the Book of Mormon was just the beginning of a much larger project.
Maybe it was like Battlefield Earth.
Yeah, there's that. We did
more Scientology humor for you tonight, folks.
The Thetans.
Have you ever seen Battlefield Earth? Do you know what I'm talking about, Bill?
I have not seen Battlefield Earth. I'm a minor bit familiar with Scientology, though.
L. Ron Hubbard wrote a lot of science fiction, and then he kind of based his religion on the science fiction, if we can call it a religion. I have not read these. Okay, there's an atrocious movie made with John Travolta, of course, of Battlefield Earth. It's a science fiction book. It's huge. It's huge. Okay, there's a lot of words and a lot of pages. And my understanding is that L. Ron Hubbard, that was like the first one, and then he wrote all these sequels to Battlefield Earth. So I was saying maybe the Book of Mormon was supposed to be the Mormon version of Battlefield Earth, the first one.
By the way, when you seal 2/3 of the Book of Mormon, you are making it very possible that at some future point you can pick the project back up and you have at least twice as much material yet to go.
You know, you're right. And it's possible that alone is what was being referred to in that comment, that the Book of Mormon was just an introduction. And maybe that's what he was talking about.
By the way, I have another prophecy for all those who are listening to this content 3,000 years into the future. I prophesy that you will, of yet, still not have the sealed portion of the Book of Mormon accessible to you unless you look to Chris Nemelka for his version of events. So
the good thing is that Jesus will have come back by then and he can tell you all about it.
We'll see. I doubt that too.
3,000 years. He's got to come back by then, Bill. Come on.
Can you imagine how many more high demand religions will exist between now and then?
I'm guessing a lot.
But it will be. All right. The next category here is magic circles. William Stafford already told us some of that. I'll just note Lucy Mack Smith admits this is, to me, was an interesting one when I read this in the Joseph Smith biography that she wrote. Let my reader suppose that because I shall pursue another topic for a season, let not my reader suppose that because I shall pursue another topic for a season, that we stopped our labor and went at trying to win the faculty of a Brock. By the way, I'm surprised that Carrie Molstein hasn't suggested that that's the name of Abraham in a text. But do you know what is the faculty of a Brock?
I
Are,
think it's usually called ABRAC, but who the hell knows? The thing is this, I know what it is, but only because I'm pretty sure I got it from this book when I read through it. It's Steve Michael Quinn's Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview. And that's why I made the next slide. And I think that's what you're alluding to. No, what it is abracadabra, which is, of course, easily recognized even today, magical hocus pocus kind of word. Hocus pocus is another. Abracadabra and abrac is this. This is a Mason's 1823 enhancement of the abracadabra magic triangle. Because if you take the first letter A and put it at the top of the triangle, then the next one you have AB, right? Then the next line is ABR, and then there's ABRA. You're just adding one more letter to the word abracadabra with each line until you've spelled it all out at the bottom. The key being that if you go from the bottom and count up 7 steps, 7 being a magically significant number, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. The 7th line is Abrac. That's the faculty of Abrac. It's referring to the most, mysterious, spiritually, symbolically significant, powerful faculty of abracadabra.
I love it. Folks get to learn things about Mormon. This is one of the things I said. I said this a while back. I have become really good at certain topics that come up in, let's say, using sort of the generic term of barroom trivia. You'll be in a group of people and you're having a conversation, and you're able, as a deep diver in Mormon history, you're able to know things about a whole plethora of topics because Mormonism connects to all these things, whether it's the faculty of Abrac, whether it's things about Egyptian that you have no business knowing, but because Mormonism connects to Egyptian, there are so many cool little topics that Mormonism gives you a little bit of a glimpse into because it is dabbling into everything. Okay, so the faculty of Abrac, that is really awesome.
So all she's saying, and I know the apologists try and get away from this any way they can. All she's saying is, look, we were into this magic stuff. I almost forgot it's not Friday night. Our family was into this magic stuff, which they took seriously. But we weren't into it to the point where we didn't do all the stuff we were supposed to be doing with farming and, other ways of making money that are more normal, making crafts, selling them at fairs, etc. Okay. That's what she's saying. She's saying we were into it, but we didn't let it consume us. That's the straightforward meaning. Let not my reader suppose that because I shall pursue another topic for a season, that we stopped our labor and went at trying to win the faculty of Abrac, drawing magic circles, or soothsaying to the neglect of all kinds of business.
Yeah, we still got our business done and we did the magic stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that's what it's saying.
It is. Oh, that is a very reasonable, natural reading and interpretation of what she's writing down. Joseph, I don't know how to pronounce that, Capron, describing treasure. By the way, the main thing here is she talks about drawing magic circles. This is part of the treasure digging ritual. Joseph Capron says the same thing. Orders were given to stick a parcel of large stakes in the ground. By the way, notice how that coincides with what William Stafford said. Why do we think they're both lying? They're two different people talking about drawing circles, talking about putting objects in the ground inside the circle, the hazel sticks or the large stakes in the ground in a circular form. And when you start to get 4, 5, 6 different people unconnected to each other, telling you stories that seem to have the same kind of narrative to them, maybe you should just believe them.
It seems like these magic circles were not made to capture evil spirits, but to keep them out.
Yes. to keep the guardian spirit from being able to stop you from procuring the treasure. And then this last one isn't an actual quote. It's just noting that there are historians, including D. Michael Quinn. I think there's a picture in that book you held up of the Mormonism in the, what is it, the World Magic View?
Early Mormonism in the Magic Worldview. It's
Yeah.
a long title.
It is. There's a picture in there, I believe, of different items, and I can find it online. I don't have it in this, but one of those items is a dagger. And so there's conversation around Joseph Smith possessed a pointed dagger, which his family used to etch the circles around the digging sites.
There
Look
it
at
is
that.
on the top. On
There
the
it
right
is.
page.
Yeah, perfect. So again, digging circles is part of the treasure digging ritual. You've got that one covered. Now we get animal sacrifices. We already heard about the black sheep that William Stafford lost. You know, how many farmers
Joseph was a bad boy.
he was? How many farmers lost animals? By the way, if you remember our episode on gold thrones and Mormon Hill, and it was early on in our time doing Mormonism Live, not the hill Cumorah, but a hill nearby that was referred to as Mormon Hill had multiple sheep skeletons in it when the sheriff inspected the hill years later. There were, yeah. So
was it Mormon Hill or Miners Hill?
Miners Hill, yes. And I think in some references it is called Mormon's Hill, though. And when people hear Mormon's Hill, they often confuse it for Cumorah, but it's not. But the one we talked about that night, at least one of them was Miners Hill, yes. Okay, animal sacrifices, rituals to appease the guardian spirits. Again, Joseph Capron, same one we just mentioned. They had sacrificed sheep in order, as they said, to appease the evil spirit, to prevent it from moving the treasure. Peter Ingersoll said that Joseph told him the charm would be so powerful that he must have a black sheep and cut its throat and lead it around in a circle. By the way, the violence that Joseph Smith and his family committed against animals, PETA would be pissed at the Smith family. They killed so many dogs and sheep doing this magic stuff, and never was a treasure procured. Just wasted lives.
Well, they ate the mutton. It's not like it was wasted. I mean, this is kind of what you did to sheep back then. I think it's what you do to sheep today. Sorry to bring it up.
Yeah. Yeah. But cutting his throat and then dragging him around in a circle.
Well, you
So
walk him around in a circle.
Yeah.
See, he has to do all the hard work.
Yeah. Anyway. Okay. Let's, Peter Ingersoll says the same thing. Willard Chase, Joseph Smith said the enchantment was so powerful, he could not get the plates until they were appeased by sacrificing.
And even then, he couldn't get the plates.
Yeah. Elsewhere in the same tradition, a black sheep had to be taken to the ground and there cut into pieces.
Can we go back for just a second?
We sure
Is
can.
this a correct quotation?
Where are you looking?
That one we were just on with all the different little quotes from Willard Chase, where he says Joe Smith Sr. said the enchantment was so powerful they could not get the plates.
Let me do this.
Is he talking about the gold plates? Is this an intersection?
I'm just going to look this up. Willard Chase.
I know he's recalling it, but still it's 1833. It's not that long afterward. Because what I would expect to see while you're looking, what I would expect to see is people saying that Joe Smith Sr. said the enchantment was so powerful that he could not get the treasure until the evil spirits were appeased by sacrificing, right? But he says, get the plates. And if he's talking about the gold plates, then I think that's significant, as opposed to talking about just random plates of gold and silver. But by those kind of plates, I mean the kind of big dish plates, that they were talking about as being part of the treasure hoard.
I'm just taking a look. The closest thing, let's see. He then inquired when he could have them and was answered thus, come 1 year from this day, bring your oldest brother and you shall have them.
Right.
So I think what's being referenced here, again, this isn't an exact quote. I'm really apologizing for that, but it's this idea that Joseph Smith had to carry out a ritual that was difficult to do. He had to bring certain people, had to ride a certain horse, had to come at a certain time of night, that there was a sacrifice that had to be made in order to get it. So there's that.
Okay.
All right. So let's Now we've got the gospel ritual required. This is what Moroni required. And this is Willard Chase. This comes out of Mormonism Unveiled. This is the testimony of Willard Chase in Mormonism Unveiled. I'm just trying to think. I don't think we need to read this, though this is sort of the setup. Let me read this anyway. This will give us some sort of context to what we're about to read. But the next slide, so I'm going to skip here. So this is where I'm at. The next slide is where it actually has the material. This only shows you the pages it's on. And then I cut out the spot that we need to zoom in on and read. But let me read this part here. So I became acquainted with the Smith family, known as the authors of the Mormon Bible, in the year 1820. At that time, they were engaged in the money digging business, which they followed until the later part of the season in 1827. In the year 1822, I was engaged in digging a well. I employed Alvin and Joseph Smith to assist me, the latter of whom is known as the Mormon prophet. After digging about 20 feet below the surface of the earth, we discovered a singularly appearing stone, which excited my curiosity. I brought it to the top of the well. So again, Willard Chase says, I'm the one down in the bottom of the well digging, and this was on our family's property. Because he was engaged in digging a well, he employed Alvin and Joseph to assist him. If you are digging on your property, RFM, and you hire me to help you,
yes,
and you are the one in the bottom digging, and you find an interesting rock,
yes,
and you throw it up to me to go like, hey, isn't this cool looking?
yes.
Who does that rock belong to?
And that's why I would never throw it up to you to look at, Bill. Look, on the other hand, I know what you're saying. Obviously, it belongs to Willard Chase, but the other side of it is it's a freaking rock. Get over it, Willard.
It's not like it's a magic rock or anything. It's just a cool looking rock.
Yes. And I mean, really, the excitement level in this area of the country at this time is very low. It's a low bar for excitement. So you find an unusual looking rock. You want to keep it. Sure. I get it.
To the point where fresh mutton is a good meal.
Mutton.
Okay. I brought it to the top of the well, and as we were examining it, Joseph put it into his hat, and then his face into the top of his hat. It has been said by Smith that he brought the stone from the well, but this is false. There was no one in the well but myself. The next morning he came to me and wished to obtain the stone, alleging that he could see in it. But I told him I did not wish to part with it on account of its being a curiosity. Again, it was smooth, which would have been abnormal for a rock. It was, again, rocks are smooth all the time down in the riverbed, but to dig 20 feet down in the earth and to find a smooth egg-shaped rock with the coloring that it has, I think would be mildly interesting.
I'm sure that it was, but this is like 10 years later, I think. And Willard, I mean, he's obsessing about it still. You can see he can't say enough about it.
Yeah, it led to gold plates. He missed out on an incredible opportunity.
And the funny thing is while he's venting his spleen about this and how unjust it is that Joseph Smith stole his rock, at the end he'll say, yeah, but I didn't really care that much about the rock anyway.
I told him I did not wish to part with it on account of its being a curiosity, but would lend it. You can borrow this rock out of a borrowed but never returned rock. Look at what came forth.
You should have gone to the rock library. He should have made him fill out a lending card on the rock.
Oh, goodness. After obtaining the stone, he began to publish abroad what wonders he could discover by looking at it. I got you, rock. I got you. Who got the best of that transaction? Joseph rubbed it in his face the rest of his life. Can you imagine being Willard? The rest of your life is just mundane and not interesting. And this guy borrowed your rock and created an entire religion out of it.
That rock was mine.
And made so much disturbance among the credulous part of the community that I ordered the stone to be returned to me again. He had it in his possession about 2 years. I believe sometime in 1825, Hiram, the brother of Joseph Smith, came to me and wished to borrow the same stone, alleging that they wanted to accomplish some business of importance, which could not very well be done without the aid of a stone.
By the way, it is kind of funny. I never really looked at it this closely before. But Willard Chase is here talking about how Joseph Smith is seeing all these bizarre things and making all this stuff up out of this rock, right? Because he talks about the credulous community, right? They'll believe anything. And so, because he's doing all of this iniquity by getting credulous people to believe the things he says he sees in the rock, I demanded he return the rock. Because if it's just made up, he wouldn't just pick up another rock and keep doing the same thing. No, Willard Chase evinces, I think, his belief in the power of the rock. And it really is a bigger deal to him than he lets on here.
Yeah. Okay. I came to me, wished to borrow the same stone, alleging he accomplished some business of importance, which could not very well be done without the aid of the stone. I told him it was of no particular worth to me, but merely wished to keep it as a curiosity. Again, same reason. And if he would pledge me his word and honor, last time they kept it for 2 years, I think. So he told, like, you have to pinky swear this time. I thought I could rely on his word at this time, as he made a profession of religion. By the way, it would be 1822, 1824. So maybe this is sometime in the neighborhood. Yeah, in fact, he says there 1825. I thought I could rely on his word at this time, as he made a profession of religion. But in this I was disappointed, for he disregarded both his word and his honor. In the fall of 1826, a friend called upon me and wished to see that stone about which so much had been said. And I told him if he would go with me to Smith's, a distance about a half mile, he might see it. But to my surprise, on going to Smith's and asking him for the stone, he said, you cannot have it. I told him it belonged to me. Repeated to him the promise he made. By the way, I believe Willard Chase's side of the story. I believe the dig is on his property. I do believe Willard is the one who found the stone at the bottom digging. And I do believe that Joseph borrowed the rock. Joseph didn't keep his word. He deceived Willard Chase, and he kept it. Even if it's a magic stone, you have to keep your promise. You have to return the rock.
He's a rock thief.
He is. He says, you cannot have it. I told him it belonged to me, repeated to him the promise he made me at the time obtaining the stone, upon which he faced me with a malignant look and said, I don't care who in the devil it belongs to. You shall not have it. And that's the finishing, which is on this next.
You shall not pass. Joseph Smith is like Charlie Brown going trick-or-treating. I got a rock.
So I thought we'd read that. That's interesting, but I want you to now read this red underline part. In fact, let's do this. If you can see it, if you can read the very first part of that paragraph, and then I'll go to the bigger section when we get to the red.
I'm going to try and read it by the force. Let me just put us down here. They'll give me a little bit more. In the month of June, 1827, I'm reading it. Joseph Smith Sr. related to me. This is the dad. Joseph Smith Sr. related to me. And who is it? Who's speaking? This is Willard Chase, right?
Yep.
Yeah. This is a good one. To me, the following story, that some years ago, a spirit had appeared to Joseph, his son, in a vision, and informed him that in a certain place there was a record on plates of gold, and that he was the person that must obtain them. He was the person who must obtain them, right? And this he must do in the following manner. Now we're into the red stuff.
Okay, let me skip ahead here. I'll put us back.
Okay, on the 22nd of September, he must repair to the place where was deposited this manuscript, dressed in black clothes, riding a black horse, with a switch tail, which I looked up as well, and demand the book in a certain name. Now, I don't know what that means. Demand the book in a certain name, but it's very specific. And after obtaining it, he must go directly away and neither lay it down nor look behind him. There's that again. Remember, his mom said that. Joseph Smith's mom said that. They accordingly fitted out Joseph with a suit of black clothes and borrowed a black horse. He repaired to the place of deposit and demanded the book, which was in a stone box, unsealed, and so near the top of the ground that he could see one end of it, and raising it up, took out the book of gold. Took out the book of gold.
Okay. How
You know
can
what that means to demand something in a certain name?
the only thing I can make of it is that there is some part of the ritual is the things you have to say. You
Yes.
have to say certain things. But when I look at this, how can anybody read this? And again, we have similarities in other stories. It's not like Willard Chase is the only one saying this kind of thing. But how can somebody read this and not go, this is just a treasure digging ritual? Why would the actual angel Moroni, working on behalf of Heavenly Father and his son Jesus Christ, require a black horse, require black clothes, require the dark of night, require certain words to be said, require one not to turn around and look away? This is a treasure digging ritual. And when you see Mormonism and go, you know what? If I look at Mormonism in its earliest form, it's a treasure digging story. And all the people who associated with Smith prior to him getting the plates, many of them talk about this narrative as if it's a treasure digging ritual or a treasure digging story. Any thoughts you have about that?
Yeah, I looked it up. I don't trust AI, but I did ask the question, what does it mean in a treasure digging context to demand something in a certain name? And what it suggests is that the name was usually a divine or commanding name, e.g., in the name of God or a specific angel or spiritual figure. Like, remember, we had Abraham in that particular papyrus with the other names, the magic spell, used to override the power of the guardian spirit. So the name has got to be a name of power of some sort.
Yeah, what RFM was referring to was Leiden Papyrus number 384.
I love it when you say that.
Yeah, great. Okay. All right, let's see here.
Certain names are thought to have power. And of course,
Yeah.
the name of, I mean, in Christianity today, talk to your Christian neighbor. They believe that the name of Jesus has power in it. And by invoking it, you can achieve spiritual ends, such as casting out spirits or getting God to do you a solid.
And I know that apologists will come in and go, Bill, come on, rituals are all over the place. I mean, take Mormonism. We have baptism and laying on of hands for the Holy Ghost and blessing the sacrament. And yes, you can go back to the Old Testament and you can find certain rituals, or you could pull the story of Jesus and there's going to be a fish, and if you catch it and you do this way, there's going to be a coin in its mouth. Like, I get it.
Mm.
But when I read this story, this doesn't sound to me like a gospel narrative. This sounds to me like a treasure digger.
Yeah. No, I think you're absolutely right. And by the way, we talk about slitting the throat of that poor black sheep, the weather, right? Wether,
You're
and
so
leading it around in a circle. Look, I don't want to be disrespectful at all, but Christianity is also based upon the idea that there is power not only in the name of Jesus Christ, but in his blood.
yes, and the Old Testament is full of animal sacrifice. So surely to cut an animal's throat and bleed it out over a bucket served lots of religious ritual purposes in the Old Testament. Um, it's just that when I read about what Joseph Smith is doing, it doesn't sound like the acts of Christianity. It sounds so much more like the comparisons to his early treasure digging.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to move on here. Physical punishment for violating God's rituals. This is Willard Chase again. I'll just say here, he again opened the box and in it saw the book and attempted to take it out, but was hindered. He saw in the box something like a toad.
A toad?
This is where the white salamander that Mark Hoffman utilizes the toad story.
Can I just recapitulate the background because it's so delicious? That Willard Richards is swearing, okay? Whether you can believe him or not, I don't know. But he knew Joseph Smith and he knew his dad, and he was in the neighborhood, okay? And Joseph Smith worked on his farm digging a well at one point. So he's in a position to know. And he says in 1833, Willard Richard testifies that he heard the story from Joseph Smith Sr. about Joseph Smith Jr., that when Joseph again opened the box, he saw the book, that's the stone box, and attempted to take it out, but was hindered. He saw in the box something like a toad. This is how Shortly thereafter, it's very, very contemporaneous, 1833. Not exactly contemporaneous, but it's not years and decades later like so many of these quotes and stories that we see. And it's from a person who was definitely there and in a position to have heard this from Joseph Smith Sr.
And this isn't crazy. Again, this is such an anomaly story that we get this idea of a toad that soon turns into an appearance of a man, allegedly Moroni, who strikes him on the side of his head.
Mm.
This account for a Mormon would be weird. Like, Moroni isn't a reptile or an amphibian. Like, that doesn't make any sense. I say reptile because of salamander, toad being amphibian. But this idea that, if you remember, it's David Whitmer and Oliver Cowdery and Joseph Smith who are Whitmer's reporting, seeing Moroni on the side of the road who's heading to Cumorah, a word he's never heard before, by the way, to those Mesoamerican apologists. But soon after, they give the account about Mary Whitmer. Hello, Mary, if you remember that story. But smack in between those two stories is the idea that Moroni, they followed him to like a shed or something, and they report that he is under the shed. And this is a shed that's built on the ground level. It's not up in the air that somebody could hide under it. The only way this makes sense is that if Moroni transformed into some smaller kind of creature and could then fit himself under the shed. And so it's not just Willard Chase who's telling us this story. We get it a little ambiguously, but we also get it that Moroni can change form into something much smaller and be able to fit under a ground level shed.
Moroni has vast cosmic powers, but he lives in a teeny weeny living space.
Yeah, so this story isn't just an anomaly. There's this other story from a faithful witness of the restoration who speaks to something that goes along that coincides with this.
And before you go on, the only thing that I would have to maybe push back on what you said is I think salamanders are amphibians too.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I was thinking they were more like a lizard.
No, I don't think so. They're nice and soft and they're fun to pet.
Great. Well, then that makes the toad in the salamander much more similar than sort of a side species, cousin species to the toad. Okay, here we go. Not being discouraged at trifles, he again stooped down, strove to take the book, when the spirit struck him again and knocked him 3 or 4 rods. Now, RFM, how long is a rod?
Well, it depends on if you're eating your Wheaties, but I understand that back in the day, a rod was 16.5 feet.
Yeah, so 48 to 64, somewhere in that range.
It's basically around 60 feet is what they're saying, 45 to 60 feet.
And hurt him prodigiously.
Well, if you got knocked 45 or 60 feet, you'd be hurt prodigiously too.
I wouldn't be able to go home in one piece that night. I would be at the hospital with something broken and certainly not be able to walk easily.
They've got this new thing that they're doing in movies and these action movies where they kick super hard and the person goes flying like up against the wall or something or break through a fence. They're not going 60 feet.
No, it's a lot further than that, huh?
Yes.
After recovering from his fright, he inquired why he could not obtain the plates, to which the spirit replied, because you have not obeyed your orders. He then inquired when he could have them and was answered thus: come 1 year from this day and bring with you your oldest brother, and you shall have them. Now, I'll just note, Moroni is clueless that over the next year, Alvin Smith is about to die.
Right, because treasure spirits don't have the ability to see into the future. They have one job.
Why would God require Moroni to require Joseph Smith to bring a person who's not going to be living when the time comes?
It makes a lot more sense when it's a treasure guardian spirit, doesn't it? But I would also answer for the same reason that God said that, which apostle was it that he called to go to England, but ended up dying in 1838 in the Battle of Crooked River?
Dan Jones.
No, he was not apostle, but isn't he the same guy who also saw Bigfoot? Cain, excuse me, I mean Cain. Okay, hang on. I'll go. You go ahead. You keep going.
Okay.
I'll look it up. It's an
We've already
easy one.
we've talked about a rod equals 16 and a half feet. Is there anything else you want to say about this slide?
No, as long as we got the amphibian part in there, I'm happy.
Okay, great. Excellent. Okay, Martin Harris. Joseph said the angel told him that he must not get the plates for the purpose of making money, that if he did, he would be destroyed.
It was David W. Patton.
Yeah, well, I said Dan Jones. David Patton. Yeah, okay. That makes sense. That's who I was thinking, but I said the name of the wrong person. Martin Harris. So he says that Smith will be destroyed if Smith has the wrong motivation. Really? I mean, there's a lot of threats of destroying. He's going to destroy Emma if she doesn't go along with polygamy. He's going to destroy Smith if he doesn't find the plates. He's going to, destroy what's his name if he keeps using his fake Seer stone. There's just there's all these threats of destruction, but nobody ever really gets destroyed. So
no, God is kind of heavy-handed in this whole thing. By the way, I want you to know what I asked my computer to come up the answer of David W. Patton.
yeah,
The question is, who saw Cain in a Bigfoot in Mormon history? It comes right up. Early church apostle David W. Patton.
yeah, AI is the future of getting answers quickly, faster than using Google and a search engine. All right, let's see here. So there's that. So I'll just note that again, both in the treasure digging rituals had to be performed correctly. Otherwise, there was this threat of the guardian spirit harming you. And in the gold plates and Moroni narrative, if Joseph didn't carry out the ritual correctly, he was also in threat of being harmed.
Well, imagine if you're the guardian spirit, and I do mean this in a serious way, sort of, but in this whole idea, this whole cultural context, what you're trying to do is you're trying to steal the treasure that the guardian spirit is entrusted and commanded to protect. So, of course, they're going to be very, very upset if you try and do that.
Yeah. Okay. The next part here is he has to bring a person. And again, I only say this as sort of a component of the ritual. We know that he was first supposed to bring his brother Alvin Smith, but Alvin, and again, this is the same part from Willard Chase where he says he's supposed to bring his brother. Trouble was that Alvin Smith died on November 19th, 1823. And so when September of the following year rolled around, he wasn't available for Smith to bring. So then we get accounts that talk about that Samuel Lawrence is now to be the man. And this is in the Mormonism Unveiled as well. The Spirit then commanded him to come again in just 1 year and to bring a man with him. On asking who might be the man, he was answered that he would know him when he saw him. And then Joseph believed that one Samuel T. Lawrence was the man alluded to by the Spirit. By the way, this is still Willard Chase continuing on in that narrative. And I'll just note here at the end, the last part there underlined, not long after this, Joseph altered his mind and said that Lawrence was not the right man, nor had he told him the right place. Because in that middle part that's not underlined, Samuel Lawrence is asked by Smith to know where the place is that the plates are. And they have this whole rigmarole where Lawrence claims to know where they are. And Smith eventually says that's not the right place. But by the way,
guardian is so far off. It's not even a man at all.
I would assume, by the way, though, that maybe this is not the Hill Cumorah. Maybe it's a different hill, but I almost wonder if this is a different spot on the same hill. But I don't think we get, it does say went with him to a hill, a singular looking hill in Manchester, and showed him where the treasure was. So my hunch is that Joseph Smith has been to the Hill Cumorah at multiple times in his life. So there's that. And then Samuel T. Lawrence is not the guy. So who is the guy? And now it's not a guy at all. By the way, Joseph is told that it's going to be a man that he has to come with, and eventually it's not a man at all. It's a woman.
The man is a woman.
And I thought this would be interesting. Are you able to read the 3 red sections?
Let's see here.
Let me fix this.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I don't know how to.
There we go.
Let's see. Neighbor. Okay. Not long after this, Joseph altered his mind and said, I. So this is Lawrence.
Yeah.
No,
it's
this is
L
no,
for
it's
Lawrence.
NL.
Yep.
Said Lawrence. Okay, I'm so sorry. Was not the right man, nor had he told him the right place. So the whole thing is he changes his mind. And after I showed you the place where the plates are buried, I'm going to say, actually, I was just kidding. I didn't show you the right place. So if you go digging there, you're not going to find anything. And that's because I showed you the wrong place on purpose. Because for some reason, I knew that you wouldn't be the right guy, even when I thought you were the right guy. About this is really, isn't it painful sometimes to read this?
Let me do this, by the way. I'll read this. I'll have you read the middle and the right section, because I actually want to read all the way up to the big giant squares. I think there's a bunch of this story that's really important. So let me do this. Not long after this, Joseph altered his mind and said that Lawrence was not the right man, nor had he told him the right place. About this time, he went to Harmony in Pennsylvania and formed an acquaintance with a young lady by the name of Emma Hale, who he wished to marry. In the fall of 1826, he wanted to go to Pennsylvania to be married, but being destitute of means, he now set his wits to work how he should raise money and get recommendations to procure the fair one of his choice. He went to Lawrence with the following story, as related to me by Lawrence himself, that he had discovered in Pennsylvania on the bank of the Susquehanna River a very rich mine of silver, and if he would go there with him, he might have share in the profits, that it was near high water mark, and that they could load it into boats and take it down the river to Philadelphia to market. Lawrence then, by the way, this sort of reminds me of this story in early church history with Joseph Smith Sr. What was the plant he was selling? You know what I'm talking
No, ginger mandrake.
Yeah, it was ginger root.
Ginger root.
Yeah, it was ginger. And Joseph Smith Sr. got screwed by somebody. And here is Smith doing a similar kind of thing, but he's the one now doing the screwing. So
Well, some people like ginger and other people like Marianne.
Yeah, that's right. And some people like the skipper. So.
I was just catching up, by the way. So now I have the slide in front of me.
Okay, got you. Let me put us down at the bottom. Will that work, or can you read it? Can you read it like that?
I'm not sure, but I have it right in front of me.
Let me get
you want me to read the second box?
Yeah, let me get you to the red first. Lawrence then asked Joseph if he was not deceiving him. No, said he, for I have been there and seen it with my own eyes. And if you do not find it so when we get there, I will bind myself to be your servant for 3 years. Mm-hmm. By these grave and fair promises, Lawrence was induced to believe something in it and agreed to go with him. And then
everybody's going along with it, but in retrospect, they kind of suspected that it wasn't on the up and up.
So if you'll start with that first full sentence on the line above and then work your way through the red.
Lawrence soon found that Joseph was out of money and had to bear his expenses on the way. So he's got to pay his way. Lawrence has to pay Joseph's way. When they got to Pennsylvania, Joseph wanted Lawrence to recommend him to Miss Hale, i.e. Emma, which he did, although he was asked to do it. And I guess making a formal introduction is not something you would commonly be asked to do, but could not well get rid of it as he was in his company. Do you know what that means?
Which he did, although he was asked to do it, but could not well get rid of it as he, because Lawrence is with Smith on this endeavor. Lawrence doesn't know the area. Smith's been there once before. He's met Emma. He's attracted to her, fallen in love. And he uses Lawrence to get an introduction to Emma. And Lawrence is there with Smith and no one else. So he pretty much has to do what his companion asks him to do, because otherwise he's sort of bucking up against the guy that he traveled there with.
Okay, it sounds like a lot of excuse making for people falling in with Joseph and later on wanting to distance themselves from him. That's all I'm saying. Lawrence then wished to see the silver mine, and he and Joseph went to the river and made search, but found nothing. Because remember, Joseph got him there saying that there's a silver mine down there. That's how he got Lawrence to pay his way. Thus, Lawrence had his trouble for his pains and returned home lighter than he went, while Joseph had got his expenses borne and a recommendation to his girl. Joseph's next move was to get married, the girl's parents being opposed to the match. As they happened to be from home, he took advantage of the opportunity and went off with her and was married. I think that much is accepted in standard church history, that he eloped, that the two of them eloped, Joseph and Emma. Now, being still destitute of money, by the way, the reason they had to elope was because Emma's mother did not think highly of Joseph Smith or his occupation. Now, being still destitute of money, he, Joseph, set his wits at work. Again, how he should get back to Manchester, his place of residence. He hit upon the following plan, which succeeded very well. By the way, this plan is going to sound a lot like the other plan, except in reverse. He went to an honest old Dutchman by the name of Stowell, Josiah Stowell, sounds like it, and told him that he had discovered on the bank of Black River in the village of Watertown, Jefferson County, New York, a cave. So I found treasure up there. So he tells Lawrence, I found treasure down here in Pennsylvania. So come with me and I'll give you a share. He pays his way. There's no treasure. And now he's going to do the same thing with Josiah Stowell, according to this account, except reverse it and say, I know there's a treasure up north in New York.
By the way, RFM, before you continue, remember when Smith tells the story, he says, Stoll came to me and told me where a silver mine was buried.
Mm.
But when others tell the story, they say that didn't happen that way.
Ah.
It was Smith going to Stoll and telling him where a treasure was buried. By the way, ask yourself, which one makes more sense in light of all the treasure digging stories that involve Joseph Smith?
Yeah, who did bring it up? So according to this, he went to an honest old Dutchman by the name of Stoll and told him that he had discovered on the bank of Black River up in New York a cave in which he had found a bar of gold as big as his leg and about 3 or 4 feet long. That's a big bar of gold. That he could not get it out alone on account of its being fast at one end. Now, I would think that if Joseph Smith actually knew about the weight of gold, he would realize he couldn't get this thing out because it weighed too much. But apparently, Joseph Smith's understanding of the weight of gold is not fully developed at this point.
It doesn't get developed very much further later on either, does it?
No. So the reason he can't get out this huge, it's as big as his leg and it's 3 or 4 feet long, this bar of gold. But the reason he can't get it out is because, not because it's too heavy, it's because it's stuck at one end. It's fast at one end. And if he would move him, he being Stoll would move Joseph Smith to Manchester, New York. They would go together and take a chisel and mallet and get it. And Stoll should share the prize with him. And Stoll moved him. Now, is this why it happens, that trial's in Bainbridge, New York?
Yeah. Again, we tell this, the way apologist suggests this story unfolds is that Stoll hears of the gifted spiritual, the spiritual gifts that Joseph Smith has. He seeks out Smith, and Smith goes to work as the scryer for Josiah Stoll, pointing him to the treasure. But what seems to really be happening is that Joseph Smith is broke, and he's trying to figure out, how do I get to where Emma is, and how do I get to stay there permanently so that I can get away from Palmyra and start to make my way in the world by living with her family, which he does for a short time.
Yes. So let's see here. A short time after their arrival at by the way, I'm out of the red stuff.
Yeah, keep going. You can keep reading that part.
Okay, a short time after their arrival at Manchester, Stowell reminded Joseph of his promise, ahem, but he calmly replied that he would not go because his wife was now among strangers and would be very lonesome if he went away. So sorry, I can't help you with that whole gold bar thing, Josiah.
If there's really a bar of gold, You leave everyone and you just go. Like, it's a bar of gold 3 or 4 foot long. Who cares that someone's left alone for a month, you know?
Well, he took her with him to go to the hill. Why didn't he just bring Emma along?
Yeah.
There's always an excuse. And you see that moving over into church history as well. There's always an excuse for why things don't go the way Joseph Smith says God says they will. Mr. Stoll was then obliged to return without any gold and with less money than he came. So same thing happened to him as happened to Lawrence.
By the way, Kirtland Safety Society, all the times that Joseph borrows money from people, I think there's a whole list of people who came away with less money than they had originally when you're interacting with the prophet Joseph Smith.
I know I sure did.
I can think of about 7 million others.
Yes. Or 17 million if you go with the church's numbers.
Well, I'm going with just the active ones who pay the tithing.
In the forepart of September, I believe, 1827, the prophet requested me to make him a chest. Now, this would be the month he gets the plates from the hill. The prophet requested me to make him a chest, informing me that he designed to move back to Pennsylvania and expecting soon to get his gold book. He wanted a chest to lock it up, giving one to understand at the same time that if I would make the chest, he would give me a share in the book.
By the way,
yes.
It strikes me, if I have metal plates, am I really protecting them by putting them in a wood box? In other words, isn't it almost just as easy to carry the wood box with the wood plates as it is to carry the plates?
It might be, but he wants it to lock it up. Yeah, I know. It's not like it's a big gun safe or something, right? Where you put your guns, and then if someone comes in, it would be very difficult for them to lift up the entire gun safe and walk out the front door with it. They could just grab a gun if a gun were lying around, right? But this little chest, I mean, anybody could just pick the chest up with the plates in it and go through the front door.
Yeah, I've seen the box. Eldred G. Smith brought it to a fireside in the Kirtland Stake Center back when I was first in the church. And the box isn't something super special. It's just a wood box that the plates almost certainly wouldn't fit in anyway by the dimensions that were described of them. So if a person could carry the plates, a person could carry a box with the plates in it. It seems like what the real purpose of the box is to be able to say there's plates inside, but there really isn't plates inside. That seems like what the box's actual rational purpose would be.
You're right. Once again, it's a story. And the purpose that's proffered for the box makes no sense. Because you can pick up the box as easy as you can pick up the plates. In fact, probably easier. You can pick the plates up in the box than outside of the box. It's just something that's used to say something's in there that's not in there. You're right. Good point. I told him my business was such that I could not make it the chest, but if he would bring the book to me, I would lock it up for him. These guys think they're playing 3D chess against each other. They're actually playing checkers.
You took my rock. I'm going to get your plates.
No, but if you bring me the book, then I will. Oh my gosh. He said that would not do, because then I'd have to bring you the book and you see I don't have anything. No, he said that would not do, as he was commanded to keep it 2 years. All these freaking commands. Oh my gosh, he just pulls them out of his arse, doesn't he?
How long did he borrow the stone for? 2 years.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
He says, he said that would not do, as it was a commandment. How long did I go on a mission? He said that would not do, as he was commanded to keep it 2 years without letting it come to the eye of anyone but himself. See, 2 years, nobody can see it, just me. This commandment, however, he did not keep, for in less than 2 years, 12 men said they had seen it. I told him to get it. And I guess the 12 includes him, the 8 witnesses, the 3 witnesses, and Joseph. Maybe he's including someone else in there. I told him to get it and convince me of its existence, and I would make him a chest. But he said that would not do, because then you'd see I don't have any freaking book. As he must have a chest, that would not do, as he must have a chest to lock the book in as soon as he took it out of the ground. See? Here's a checker move, and here's another checker move, and I'm going to block this checker move. I saw him a few days after when he told me that I must make the chest. I must make the chest. This guy is persistent. Isn't Joseph Smith persistent? I saw him a few days after when he told me that I must make the chest. I told him plainly I could not, upon which he told me that I could have no share in the book then.
which he wasn't going to get anyway. By the way, if this story's true, it also indicates that this was a financial gain story in the beginning. The Smith is like, you get a share of this, I get a share of this, everybody who helps me out gets a share of it. But then it turns into a religious narrative where everyone has to avoid the greed. Joseph Smith has to avoid the greed. And so that way this can be used for righteous purposes.
Ooh, now that is really, really good. So let me just circle back to what you just said. Joseph is on record, apparently. No, he's on record as saying that he wasn't supposed to use it for money, right? It's the spiritual value of the gold plates that's important. He can't use it to enrich himself. But here he's talking, at least according to Willard Chase in 1833, he's talking to Willard Chase about it, about the plates as if it is a financial endeavor and people will get shares of it. And how can you get a share of it unless it gets sold?
Yeah. And by the way, turning it into a narrative where you have to avoid trying to get financial gain and you have to have a righteous motivation so that the plates are used appropriately gives you an out to say to all the people that you promised who would get a share of what this thing would be worth.
So a few weeks after this conversation, Willard Chase continues. He came to my home, my house, and related the following story. Here's what Joseph told him that on the 22nd of September, remember it was earlier in that month that Joseph first came to Willard and asked him to make the chest for the plates, that on the 22nd of September, he arose early in the morning.
Early, like 1 a.m., 2 a.m. It's in the dead of night.
Oh, dark 30 early. And took a one-horse wagon of someone that had stayed overnight at their house.
Joseph Knight.
Without leave or license, he's saying he took it, or that's the account. And together with his wife, repaired to the hill, which contained the book.
Yeah. And so all of that was said to the main thrust there was that first it's Alvin, then it's Samuel Lawrence, and now it's Emma Hale as some part of some ritual where the angel keeps changing his mind, mainly because Alvin died and he wasn't anticipating that. But there's so much good information there that I thought we ought to slow down and read that. So there's that. Now you've got this about why Smith would tell people that he needs to take another person with him.
Oh, on the next slide. Sorry. I'll come back over here to this screen. Yeah, because I wondered, why is it there have to be multiple people? Well, there's a number of reasons. And some of these come from Latter-day Saint sources and other come from non-Latter-day Saint sources. But it's funny how many Latter-day Saint sources come up when you ask a simple question like, why are two people necessary in treasure digs, according to folklore? Well, there's a division of labor. There's somebody who has to do the ritual and somebody who has to do the digging. Okay, and that's one of the main reasons. I get the idea that two is a minimum number. That's a skeleton crew for one of these, but you can't have less than two because somebody's got to do the digging while somebody else is doing the ritual. In one of the accounts, it says that Emma was praying while Joseph Smith was up there. And I guess she was praying to keep back the forces of darkness or whatever it was that he needed help with. The power of silence. And I'm not exactly sure how having more people than one helps it be silent, because it would seem like to remind somebody that you're talking, you'd have to say something, but I don't know. Preventing the treasure from slipping. That's another reason to have more than one person. I'm not sure I ever heard of anybody catching the treasure before it had slipped away. But usually when it starts rumbling and starts moving through the ground like treasures are wont to do, then a bunch of people with shovels can try and dig it up. It's like they're out, I don't know, what are they doing? They're clamming on the beach and they're trying to get the clam as it's trying to move away through the sand. That's what it's like, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. The multiple reasons why in a supernatural magic ritual where procuring a treasure or artifact of worth, why two people might be needed. We're at 8:00. I'm going to try to zip through here. I don't want to take up a ton more time, so let's try to zip through. I'll just note Moroni as a treasure guardian figure. So we have throat slit and bloody clothes. Now, this was what originated the entire premise of why I wanted to cover this topic tonight. I'll zoom through these. This is Historical Magazine. Date on this looks like it's 1870. I forget offhand, I should have written this down, who this person was that was talking, but it's a late reminiscence of early Mormon history. And the person says, he then told his father that in his dream, a very large and tall man appeared to him, dressed in an ancient suit of clothes, and the clothes were bloody. Again, in the original telling of this narrative to multiple people, Moroni isn't a messenger of God who lived in the Americas, who was one of the characters of the Book of Mormon. Instead, he was a Native American who is protecting a treasure, who, and the way these rituals were explained to people was that often it would be more than one Native American, and one of them would need the other one's spirit to protect the treasure. So the first one would off the second one. He would cut his throat, throw him in the ground with the treasure, and he would then protect it. And so the reason that Moroni has bloody clothes is because somebody kills him, puts him in with the plates, so that his spirit will then protect that artifact till the end of time. So there we have that one. But this isn't the only reference to this. Here we get another one. This is the Fayette Lapham.
That was Fayette Lapham, just so
That
you
is-
know, in the 1870 article.
Okay, thank you. So this is Fayette Lapham as well. He says, this is in a different place, though, by the way, I think. He was murdered or slain on the spot, and the treasure has been under his charge ever since.
I think it's the same article.
Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. This is Mormon Portraits. We went over this a couple months ago. I want to see if this says who this one is, and maybe you can find out who this is while I'm reading it. It says he appeared like a Spaniard. So in one story, he appears.
This is the next slide, right?
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I meant to turn it.
Okay.
He appears to be a Native American indigenous person who is killed to protect the treasure. In this one, he appeared like a Spaniard. Oh, you great son of Lucy, having a long beard down over his breast to about here. This is Joseph Smith Sr. putting his hand to the pit of his stomach, with his ghost throat cut from ear to ear and the blood streaming down. And it says here, while Smith was in harmony, he made the above statements in our presence to Reverend Nathaniel Lewis. It was also here that he joined the Methodist Episcopal Church. So I'm not sure whose testimony this is, but this is a different source. And this time he's like a Spaniard, throat cuts ear to ear and blood streaming down. Then we get this one. This is the Amboy Journal. Again, I don't know who this was saying it. But in this one, he saw a man standing over the spot, which appeared to him like a Spaniard, having it's the same, it must be the same thing, a long beard coming down over his breast to about here. Yeah, so this is the same source there. And then we move on to, so just to note that there are at least two sources, both in multiple places, but just two sources that are pointing to the early description of Moroni as being a treasure guardian spirit who either had bloody clothes or had his throat slit from ear to ear and blood streaming down off of his chest. So there's that. Then we get the Moroni changes form. So this is another part of like this magic stuff that's happening. We already read
before
this
you go
one.
on.
Say what?
Before you go on, was it
Please.
Dr. Wynn? Was it WYN or WYL?
WYL, Dr. Weil.
Okay, apparently he was attributing this to Joseph Knight Sr.
Okay, which would be for all intents and purposes, a faithful source, but also somebody who was connected before the religious narrative. Again, the black horse, the dark of night, the switchtail, all of that stuff. Joseph Knight was around at the time, and it's his horse that was used to go procure the plates.
Yeah, and the book's in 1886, so I doubt he was quoting him directly or anything.
Yeah. All right. So here, all I want to do is just emphasize again, this is the Toad story. No need to read it again. But just this idea that Moroni changes form, which is much more of a treasure digging narrative with folk magic rather than a gospel narrative. So there's that.
Yay, monkey in a box.
Yeah. Do you want to remind people of this story?
I was waiting all night for the monkey in the box story. Yeah, apparently. Is this Willard Chase again?
It says there Mr. Copley testified that after the Mormon, I don't know if, Lemon Copley, maybe? Yeah, the latter story was related by Lemon Copley.
Right. So Lemon Copley testified that after the Mormon brethren arrived here from the Susquehanna, one of them by the name of Joseph Knight related to him a story as having been related to him by Joseph Smith Jr. Okay, so Joseph Smith Jr. told Joseph Knight, who told Lemon Copley this and who's testifying about it. No double hearsay here, but by the way, hearsay applies in law, but not in history. As having been related to him by Joseph Smith Jr., which excited some curiosity in his mind, he determined to ask Joseph more particularly about it on the first opportunity. Oh, so now we take out one of those links. So now Lemon Copley is saying he talked to Joseph Smith Jr. himself personally. Okay, so now it's hearsay, not just double hearsay. Who again related it in the following manner. After he had finished translating the Book of Mormon, this is what Joseph Smith Jr. told Lemon Copley, according to Lemon Copley. He again buried up the plates in the side of a mountain by command of the Lord. Sometime after this, he was going through a piece of woods on a bypath when he discovered an old man dressed in ordinary gray apparel, sitting upon a log, having in his hand or nearby a small box. To which the old man replied that he had, on approaching him, Joseph, asked him, the old man, what he had in the box. What do you have in your box, old man? To which the old man replied that he had a monkey, a minky. And for 5, it's all capitalized, by the way, monkey's capitalized, all caps. And for 5 coppers, 5 pennies, he might see it. So the old man says to Joseph Smith, if you give me 5 pennies, I'll let you take a peek at my monkey. Well, Joseph answered that he would not give him even 1 cent to see a monkey, for he had seen hundreds of them. He'd seen 100 monkeys up there in the forest of upstate New York. The Bandar Log live up there. He then asked the old man where he was going, because that's what you ask an old man with a box with a monkey in it that you haven't seen because you don't want to pay 5 cents. So where are you going anyway? Joseph then, he then asked the old man where he was going, who said he was going to Charzee. Charzee. You can tell it's a place where they have monkeys because the last 2 letters are E. And Charzee, I have no idea what it is, and I tried to look it up and I wasn't getting anywhere. Someone was saying it might be an affectionate nickname for a girl named Charlotte. I don't know, but it makes me think of Charizard. I think that's the closest I can get to it, etymologically speaking, which proves that Pokemon is true. Did you want to say anything about the EE monkey?
No, I just was going to make a Pokemon comment, but no, you're great. I didn't know you were into Pokemon, but
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not. Actually, I put Charzee in there, and this came up as a possibility. Charizard. I sort of know that. I took my kid to that original Pokemon movie. Yeah. That was a while back. I think it was more fun for him than it was for me, is all I'm saying.
I don't know if it was fun for anyone.
To ponder. Okay. Joseph then passed on. I guess he doesn't even ask him where the hell Charzee is. Joseph then passed on, and not recollecting any such place in that part of the country, began to ponder over the strange interview and finally asked the Lord the meaning of it. The Lord told him that the man he saw was Moroni, which is in all caps, just like monkey was. The Lord told him that the man he saw was Moroni with the plates, and if he had given him the 5 coppers, he might have got his plates again. Are we getting the feeling that this has a sense to it of the time period between the 116 pages being lost and getting the plates back?
Yeah, it might be. Seems strange sort of after the fact when Moroni's taken the plates back to heaven or put them in another hill or went back to Mesoamerica or wherever.
Yeah. Oh, here we have a story related by our modern prophet to his followers for no other purpose as we conceive, but to make his pretensions more marvelous in their eyes. Yeah, Joseph did that. A celebrated Mormon prophet of ancient times and one of modern date have an interview in the woods and hold a conversation about a monkey. One prophet of the Lord relating a falsehood to another. Now that's interesting. The idea that one prophet of the Lord, Moroni, relating a falsehood about what was in his box to another prophet of the Lord, Joseph Smith.
Who's relating a falsehood story to everybody he talks to. All right, I'm gonna skip past here. So I just want to note, using a rock in the hat to locate worldly treasures happens in the treasure digging world, and using a rock in a hat happens in the Moroni and gold plates narrative as well. That's also overlapping, and I don't think anybody's going to dispute that.
You know what? If you open the box, whether it's going to be a monkey or the gold plates depends on who's observing, or if anybody's observing. That's why it's called Schrodinger's monkey.
Yeah, right. Whether it's a monkey or plates depends. It is both in superposition until they're seen.
Yes, I'll go away now.
Okay. There's the quotes. You can stop it. You can read those if you want to. So we're going to move now into apologetic attempts. This shouldn't take long. This is the last section of our conversation tonight. The most, again, this, I'll just put here the Palmyra Freeman over on the right. This is Palmyra, New York, August 11th, 1829. In the fall of 1827, a person by the name of Joseph Smith of Manchester, Ontario County, reported that he had been visited in a dream by the Spirit of the Almighty and informed that in a certain hill in that town was deposited this golden Bible containing an ancient record of divine nature and origin. The reason I read that is just to show that in 1829, there is a religious context to the description of Moroni. And the reason that's important, I'll go to the next slide just for a second. Mark Ashurst McGee is the apologist who has tried to tackle the similarities between treasure digging and Moroni and the gold plates. And he, in his apologetic article, this is the prominent article when people bring up this topic that is shared to try to explain why these similarities exist. And so I'm going to go through 3 of his arguments, but it's in this that one of the things he points to is that it's not just this treasure digging narrative, that if we go back to 1829, we get Smith using language that has a religious context to it. So it's not like in 1829, this was solely a treasure digging article. So now I go back and read this. The most substantial believing response comes from scholars such as Mark Ashurst McGee, Richard Bushman, and organizations such as FAIR, often drawing on sources from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and the Joseph Smith papers. They make a notable point. They argue that Joseph's own 1832 history already calls the messenger an angel, that some early hostile or skeptical newspaper accounts, such as the Palmyra Freeman, are also using overtly religious language, and that later treasure guardian details often come from hostile. By the way, aren't all critics hostile? Isn't Bill Reel and Radio Free Mormon considered by apologists to be hostile witnesses?
By apologists, yes, but we are actually quite objective.
Yeah. Come from hostile and retrospective memories. They also argue that treasure seeking was common in Joseph's environment, So overlap in form does not necessarily mean identity and substance. Their strongest point is the appeal to the early angel language. Joseph's 1832 history does say angel of the Lord, and the 1829 newspaper accounts speak of the Spirit of the Almighty. That means that means that any theory claiming Joseph only later added religious language is too crude. And I have no choice but to agree with that there are earlier accounts that have more religious context to them, and hence whatever Smith is doing, he is blurring both kinds of narratives together. The angelic register appears quite early. Again, earliest we have here is 1829. Now, RFM, you put this in. What is your thoughts here?
I did. Well, here's the thing. Okay. And let me write this thing down so I won't forget that point. The reason I put this in here is because I think that what the apologists are doing is they are going way too late in the ball game and pretending that they're early. Because if you look at that, the date of that Palmyra Freeman, it's August of 1829. What has just happened? Well, Joseph Smith has just completed his translation, his dictation, his revelation of the Book of Mormon, which is a very Christian document. I think we can all agree on that. And there's angels everywhere. So having a critical newspaper talk about angels showing up and being involved with this book after the Book of Mormon has been translated does not surprise me in the least, because it seems very normal. And like you said, there's no hard and fast line. Let me complete that thought, okay? Because what I think they're trying to say is, wow, look, as early as 1829, they're talking about an angel in association with the coming forth of the Book of Mormon, when really that's after the Book of Mormon's already been translated. And so I just don't think it's that amazing.
Yeah, your point is, this is already a religious narrative by this point, and that's obvious because Joseph's translated the Book of Mormon, which is a religious narrative.
Right. And even in the Book of Mormon, of course, even though it's predominantly religious and very Christian, maybe too Christian, some people would say, given when it's supposed to relate to before Jesus. But we have elements of treasure digging in it, like the slippery treasures. And Joseph Smith, even at the end of his ministry, is talking about how everyone who gets into the celestial kingdom gets their own seer stone. So this is not something that goes for a period, then stops, and then immediately becomes an exclusively religious enterprise. There is layers and overlapping throughout from beginning to end of the ritual treasure digging magic showing up in Mormon doctrine.
Yeah, and so I think that's absolutely a fair point. I just want to make a note too. Dan just notes that saying angels in one situation is different than Moroni, who is a spirit of the dead. And maybe this is just a small detail to argue over, because I think it's possible that how you might describe Moroni would be an angel, even though that may not be the exact kind of context of what he actually is, that he's a resurrected personage, whatever word you want to attribute to it. It's still it's a godly ghost, which many people in any instance would still call an angel, perhaps. So,
well, I mean, if he's going with the basic regular Christian version of what an angel is by this point, and he hasn't, manufactured his own understanding of an angel. I'm talking about Joseph Smith. An angel has nothing to do with people. It's a special creation of God. It's not us. It's completely different from us. It's not us dead or us before we're born or us in a resurrected state. It's creatures that God created different from us.
Yes. Okay, so I'm just going to note here the rest of this. Their second move is to source triage. They discount late, hostile, or hearsay sources such as Chase or Lapham or Lewis or Isaac Hale. But again, we also shared lots of faithful sources as well. Joseph Knight, Joseph Knight, Lucy Mack Smith, Joseph Smith Sr., there were others as well, but the apologists want to try to always say like, oh, don't listen to this stuff. It comes from people who are hostile to the church. It's hearsay, it's late reminiscences. But when you have multiple sources that overlap on the details, I don't think it's that easy to dismiss that automatically and say that those sources can't be trusted. So there is some legitimacy to dismissing such. Ashurst McGee is right that we should have skepticism around late sources as a category, though the apologetic argument overreaches as it implies that once the most lurid details are discounted, the connection disappears, and it doesn't. The right person identified by Seer's site comes from Joseph Knight, who was friendly. The use of seer stones for treasure digging and translation is now admitted in the official church sources. The issue, therefore, is not whether some late hostile details are unreliable. It's whether substantial continuity remains beyond only the dismissed sources, and in fact, it does. So you can't just get around this by getting rid of a few of the witnesses, because what witnesses are left still testify that this has a lot of similarity to a treasure digging narrative. Their third move is a category shift. Fair explicitly argues that Moroni may, in some sense, have had a treasure guardian role and still be an angel. So this is the making it indiscernible from a fraud, which you and I have talked about, which is really the go-to on every issue in the church that's problematic, is to walk the interpretation back to a place where it matches the data the way the critic sees it. It matches, in some ways, even the critic's interpretation of the data.
Who says an angel can't protect buried treasure?
Right. Who says that Moroni can't be a treasure guardian in the same way that all the other treasure guardians were treasure guardians?
We have guardian angels, don't we? They don't just guard people. Some of them guard treasure.
Yeah. All right. So let's say here, logically, that's true. Historically, however, it concedes the key point. The plate story functioned in ways that contemporaries recognized from treasure lore. Once that concession is made, the real question changes from could an angel guard plates to why does this angelic account so thoroughly reproduce the treasure-seeking template that Joseph already lived inside? That is where apologetic writing often slides from argument to insulation, right? Argument is, no, you're wrong. This is a religious narrative. And instead it insulates it and goes, you really can't attack this. It can be allowed to look just like treasure digging and still be Moroni gold plates religious narrative. It splits the problem into 100 little pieces, so the bigger picture never gets to be seen.
I think that last sentence is worth its weight in gold.
Yeah,
I think that what they're doing so well that it stunned me for a second the first time I read it. Because what this tactic does, it says it splits the problem into 100 little pieces. So the bigger picture, so the bigger picture never gets to be seen. That's a really powerful way of putting it. What you want to do is you want to not talk about the issue. You want to talk about all these other little component parts that are over here. And you can always talk about them. And we know people who are very good at going to them when they try and talk about Mormonism, but they don't really want to talk about Mormonism. So they're going to talk about all these other things. That's kind of what they're doing here.
Yep, 100%. Okay. Did you add this or did I add this?
I did, because this was an early one. By the way, these are predominantly early sources that we're talking about. 1833 early. I know 53 and 70 are not, but primarily, and this one's from 1830 freaking one, and it's January 15th of 1831. That's practically 1830. 15 days after 1830 was over. This gets written by W.W. Phelps. Pretty friendly source. Yes, and he's writing to E.D. Howe, who has asked him. We don't have the letter from E.D. Howe to W.W. Phelps, but pretty obviously he's asking for some information about Mormonism. And this is where W.W. Phelps says in January 15th, 1831, from Canandaigua, he says this whole letter, and in it, he says, Mr. Harris, whose name is in the book as a witness, right, is a wealthy farmer, but of small literary acquirements. He is honest and sincerely declares upon his soul's salvation that the book is true and was interpreted by Joseph Smith through a pair of silver spectacles found with the plates. That all sounds very standard, doesn't it? And then we get to the next sentence where the record scratches. The places where they dug for the plates in Manchester are to be seen. Period.
Ooh, Joseph took the other treasure digging stories and tells later people that this was an effort to try to find the plates earlier.
Apparently, I think the straightforward meaning is when he says they, he's talking about Joseph Smith and Martin Harris. That they had been on treasure digs to find the plates, and obviously, some of them had not been successful since the places where they dug for the plates in Manchester are to be seen, which means still to be seen. You can still see them to this day.
And that's true, by the way. Even in the modern moment, there are people, post-Mormon men, again, we did a conversation on this early in Mormonism Live, who had found that Miners Hill and had cleaned it up, excavated it because it had sort of caved in a little bit. And there are pictures online of it being this sort of cavern dug into the side of a hill. And so some of these treasure digging sites, Dan Vogel notes in his dialogue article, some of the locations of these digs and knows precisely where they are. And again, the visual remnant of these digs still exists to this day for some of these.
Why is W.W. Phelps saying in 1831 that Joseph Smith and Martin Harris were digging for the plates?
In multiple places, in more than one place.
It doesn't sound like an angel giving you a vision of where the plates were so that you knew it immediately when you got there.
Yeah. When you're a treasure digger and then 8 years later, you've been treasure digging all this time, and now 8 years later, it becomes a religious narrative. You have to find ways to talk about the story that blends both facets so that people who are aware of both facets can somehow figure out a way to make sense of it and get rid of the cognitive dissonance.
I had mentioned at the top of the show that I think the story that Joseph Smith says about Moroni giving him a vision of the place on the hill, that he knew it immediately when he got there, was an obvious subterfuge, that this is not a story that makes sense in the real world or even the spiritual world, and that story may be covering up an earlier story that was closer to the reality of what they did. I think this might be the earlier story.
Yeah, and we didn't read it tonight, but there was one, and it might be in the next thing maybe, but if it's not, it just didn't make the show. There was one source that said that they found the plates by using the seer stone in a hat. That it wasn't Moroni showing up in Joseph's bedroom and talking to him 3 times, and then the next day he sees him again and then passes out near the field with his father and tells his father the story, and the father tells Joseph to do what the angel says, that instead it was just the rock in the hat. And that also makes much more sense with what this was and what was going on with treasure digging. Okay, I appreciate that. Anything else you want to say about this document? It is W.W. Phelps, and it's his letter. It's not hearsay. It's not secondhand.
It's so early. It's almost before Joseph Smith started treasure digging.
Yeah. That's interesting.
I'm just being,
Yeah. Yeah, almost.
That's
okay.
how early it is. That's how it's 1831. It's January 15th, 1831. You're not going to get much earlier than that.
Yeah. This is the last thing. You have one slide at the end that we'll touch on too. This is the last story. Unfortunately, it is a tiny bit long. I'll try to get through this as quick as I can. This comes from Tiffany's Monthly, which was a monthly like magazine kind of back in the day that would come out. You'd get this. And so this says May of 1869. I'm not 100% sure if it was this edition, this issue, but I think it was. But it comes from that, and we'll see here. I'll just read this really quick. Joseph had this stone for some time. There was a company there in that neighborhood who were digging for money supposed to have been hidden by the ancients. Of this company were old Mr. Stoll, I think his name was Josiah. By the way, he gets that data point right. He knows he knows something about this story so as to be close enough to it to know Josiah's name perfectly, even though he's trying to remember. Also, Mr. Beeman, also Samuel Lawrence, George Proper, Joseph Smith Jr., and his father and his brother Hiram Smith. Again, the guy's got the names down. So my initial reaction is I want to lend some credibility to at least the main substance of the story. They dug for money in Palmyra, Manchester, also in Pennsylvania and other places. When Joseph found this stone, there was, by the way, my point in this last one is, for me, this was the strongest indicator of where I could see treasure digging narrative mixed with religious narrative. And I was hoping that you, the viewer, would sense that this was the tightest example of seeing the entire transition, like the very moment when it went from being a treasure digging narrative to a religious one. So it says here, when Joseph found this stone, there was a company digging in Harmony, Pennsylvania, and they took Joseph to look in the stone for them. And he did so for a while. And then he told them the enchantment was so strong that he could not see, and they gave it up. There he became acquainted with his future wife and daughter of old Mr. Isaac Hale, where he boarded. He afterwards returned to Pennsylvania again and married his wife, taking her off to old Mr. Stoll's because her people would not consent to the marriage. She was of age, Joseph was not. By the way, this corresponds with Willard Chase's account of what Samuel Lawrence told him, that he goes to Harmony, he meets Emma, he is attracted to her, falls in love, he goes back home, and then comes back to Harmony again a second time. So at least on that data point, Willard Chase is right, at least about one point at which Samuel Lawrence, he alleges, informed him. After this, on the 22nd of September, 1827, before day, Joseph took the horse and wagon of old Mr. Stoll, and taking his wife, he went to the place where the plates were concealed. By the way, it was Joseph Knight's horse. So he's getting some data points wrong. But even in doing that, he has certain facts about that story correct. So he misremembers who the person is at the home that he gets the horse from, because Stoll is in Harmony, Joseph Knight's in Palmyra, and Smith is in Palmyra to get the plates.
But isn't Stoll there with Knight that night?
I know that Stoll and Knight are closely associated at that moment. I don't know if Stoll is at the Smith home, but maybe you know what? He has to be, right? Because when Smith comes home, he passes the plates through the window, and Stoll says he sees a little bit of green up under the cloth of the plates.
Yeah, I think Stoll was there.
I think you're right. And taking his wife, by the way, Stoll and Joseph Knight, my memory of church history is that Stoll and Knight are very closely associated. And so for this person to confuse the horse as Stoll's when it's really Joseph Knight's is, to me, a really simple mistake to make. It doesn't hurt the credibility of the witness.
I think it helps the credibility because he makes a confusion that's understandable, since Stoll was also there with Joseph Knight Sr.
Love it. And taking his wife, he went to the place where the plates were concealed. And while he was obtaining them, she kneeled down and prayed. He then took the plates.
There's the prayer part.
Say what?
There's the prayer part. That's Emma. That's what she did.
Yeah. She kneeled down and prayed. He then took the plates and hid them. By the way, it makes sense. He's told Alvin that he has to come with him to the hill. He dies. He tells Samuel Lawrence, you're the guy who has to come with me, but now I've changed my mind. He tells Emma, you have to come with me. You're part of the ritual. So of course he has to give Emma some part to play in the act of getting the plates. She's there for a reason. She's the fair maiden who gets to pray and implore that God listen to her prayer. Okay, so he then took the plates and hid them in an old black oak tree top, which was hollow. Mr. Stoll at this time at old Mr. Smith's digging for money.
It was a black oak tree, by the way.
Say what?
It was a black oak tree.
Look at that. Black horse, black sheep, black dogs, black
clothes.
Tree,
black clothes Joseph's wearing.
Black switchtail, black of night. Yep. All black. That's a part of the ritual. Mr. Stoll was at the time at old Mr. Smith's digging for money. It was reported by these money diggers that they had found boxes, but before they could secure them, they would sink into the earth. A candid old Presbyterian told me that on the Susquehanna Flats, he dug down to an iron chest that he scraped the dirt off of with his shovel, but had nothing with him to open the chest. And when he went away to get help, and when he came to it, it moved away 2 or 3 rods, 48 feet further. By the way, if it sinks 5 feet further into the earth where you can't find it digging,
Yes.
how do you know it's 48 feet further? How do you know it's 2 or 3 rods? That tells me you have no clue where it is.
That's where your stone in the hat comes in handy.
Yeah. You have to have some sort of premonition about where it went, because you didn't actually find it by digging further. You don't know how far it went away.
By the way, I was being facetious and serious at the same time.
Yeah.
That's what you see in the stone in the hat, or by whatever means.
Right.
You can see it underground. That's how he can say how far away it moved.
Yeah. By the way, there is no treasure and nothing slipped away because you're just digging in dirt where there's nothing to be found. A candid old Presbyterian, again, he said that he had nothing with him to open his chest. He comes back. He thought it had moved 2 or 3 rods into the earth. They could not get it. There were a great many strange sights. One time, the old log schoolhouse south of Palmyra was suddenly lighted up and frightened them away. Samuel Lawrence told me that while they were digging, a large man who appeared to be 8 or 9 feet high.
This is my favorite story of the whole lot. This is the one that gives me the creeps.
By the way, his height, what does that remind you of?
A giant
Zelf.
or Jaredite?
Yeah.
Zelf?
Zelf was 7 feet tall. This finding extra tall people is part of the treasure digging lore. Zelf himself fits right into this narrative.
Zelf himself.
Zelf himself. All right, let's see here. 8 or 9 feet high, came and sat on the ridge of the barn and motioned to them that they must leave. They motioned back that they would not. I'm out of here. They did not. At another time, while they were digging, a company of horsemen came and frightened them away. These things were real to them, I believe, because they were told to me in confidence and told by different ones, and their stories agreed. And they, okay, sure. So did the 11 witnesses. And they seemed to be in earnest. I knew they were in earnest. And then it says, quote, Joseph did not dig for these plates. They were placed in this way. 4 stones were set up and covered with a flat stone, oval on the upper side and flat on the bottom. Beneath this was a little platform upon which the plates were laid, and 2 stones set in a bow of silver, by means which the plates were translated, were found underneath the plates. Hidden under the hearth in his father's house, but the wall being partly down. Okay, so this is skipping ahead a moment, I think. Now the plates are back to the house. They're being hidden away. But the wall being partly down, it was feared that certain ones who were trying to get possession of the plates would get under the house and dig them out. Joseph then took them out, hid them under the old cooper's shop.
There's a cooper shop on the property, Bill.
Yeah, where one could fabricate 10 plates.
Well, it's for what? It's for making barrels, isn't it?
Yeah, and don't barrels have metal bands around them?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So in other words, metal working is part of building barrels. Yeah.
Yes, it is. Yes. So fabricating something that would resemble the plates. By the way, I think it's Dan Vogel who suggested to me years ago, before Dan and I even knew each other on any sort of personal basis. I just knew him as a scholar, and I reached out to ask him a question, and he suggested to me that the reason Smith came back to the house with a dislocated finger, a jammed finger of some sort, and informed his family that he was attacked in the woods, was that he was, prior to that, what actually hurt his finger was that he was trying to bend the metal bands that would become the rings of this fabricated plates object. And in doing so, put quite a bit of stress and slipped and somehow hurt his finger, which again, to me, makes way more sense than strangers chasing him in the woods to try to get 70-pound gold plates that he's running around with carrying that aren't gold at all, but Tumbaga. Old Mr. I'm going to say Bateman. I don't know if that's Beeman or Bateman. Old Mr. B sawed off the ends, making the box right length to put them in. And when they went in, he said he heard them jink, but he was not permitted to see them. He told me so.
The jink is supposed to tell us that they were really there. We don't get to see them. He doesn't get to see them, but he heard the jink.
Yeah, but any metal would jink, including tin or copper or lead or steel. Any of those would do that.
Or maybe he didn't hear anything.
The money diggers claimed they had as much right to the plates as Joseph had. By the way, remember, he tells Willard Chase that you lose your share. You're not going to help me make a box. I have to show you the plates first. You don't get your share. I think it's safe to assume if that story is true, then Smith may have promised to other people that they also get a share. And this indicates why people would be motivated to try to get the plates away from Joseph, because it was their treasure too. They had gone out with him. Abner Cole, Josiah Stoll. I mean, you can name 10 people who have been on treasure digs with Smith. All of them go, oh, you finally got something? All these promises you've made of times we should have found something and we didn't, and now you have something and you're not sharing? Of course he's going to be chased by these people. The money diggers claimed that they had as much right to the plates as Joseph had and that they were in company together. By the way, remember, Joseph Smith Sr. formed a treasure digging company.
Yes.
We have a newspaper article where he forms the company and all the men agree that whatever we find doing these digs belongs to all of us.
It's a literal company.
It's
not registered with the state, but there are articles of incorporation and things that they all sign on to as to what they each get. If anybody finds anything, it's a group effort. I told you Joseph Smith would have done better if he had just had the Book of Mormon written on birch bark scrolls.
Yeah, and he should have done something like that, but he didn't. So in a real sense, if there were gold plates, they truly did belong to the treasure digging company. Okay. For this reason, Joseph was afraid of them and continued concealing the plates after they had been concealed under the floor of the cooper's shop for some time.
A short time.
So if he fabricated the plates in the cooper's shop, that's also where he went back to hide them. I think that's interesting. Joseph was warned to remove them. He was warned by an angel. He took them out and hid them up in the chamber of the cooper's shop among the flags. That night, someone came, took up the floor, dug up the earth, and would have found the plates had they not been removed. Okay, now if I skip over here to the right, again, this is 167. I don't have page 168 because it didn't have something that was crucial to this topic. We're going to page 169. I was glad he was absent, for that gave me an opportunity of talking with his wife and the family about the plates. I talked with them separately to see if their stories agreed. I found they did agree. When Joseph came home, so he talks to the family, gets their story. Joseph comes home and he wants to now talk to Joseph Smith and see if their stories align up. When Joseph came home, I did not wish him to know that I had been talking with them. So I took him by the arm and led him away from the rest, requested him to tell me the story, which he did as follows. He said, an angel had appeared to him and told him it was God's work. Here, Mr. Harris seemed to wander from the subject when we requested him to continue to tell Joseph, then said, he replied, Joseph had before, by the way, this is Martin Harris. I remember us reading this account a year ago or so with a different episode. He replied, Joseph had before this described the manner of his finding the plates. He found them by looking in the stone found in the well of Mason Chase. The family had likewise told me the same thing. Joseph Smith's family and Joseph Smith inform Martin Harris that how we know where these plates are is because Joseph Smith Jr. puts a rock in a hat and he looks in the hat and he locates the plates. But if that's the way he found the plates, then they belong to the treasure digging company that they set up. If instead an angel comes in his bedroom and says, don't worry about any of this treasure digging stuff, I'm going to tell you where these plates are, Joseph can now claim this is perhaps outside of the agreement of the treasure digging company, and now I have the sole possession of this. But those men wouldn't buy it, and they would still be trying to chase him down and have the plates and the share that belongs to them.
If W. Phelps is correct in his 1831 letter, then Martin Harris knew that this is how Joseph Smith found the plates because he was with him participating in the treasure digs to
Yeah.
find the plates.
Yeah. He found them by looking in the stone found in the well of Mason Chase. The family had likewise told me the same thing. Joseph said the angel told him he must quit the company of the money digger. See, the angel says, this is a separate thing. This is not treasure digging. Whatever you find with me, you should quit that company, and this is something separate. That there were wicked men among them. He must have no more to do with them. He must not lie, nor swear, nor steal. By the way, what that insinuates is that in the past, he was a liar and a swearer and a stealer, a thief. He told him to go and look in the spectacles. By the way, the stone would be part of the treasure digging company stuff. So you need a separate tool and a separate way in which you locate the treasure. So an angel in spectacles instead of a stone in the hat, in scrying to find them. That he did so, and he saw myself, Martin Harris, standing before him.
Now, this is after the angel, I think you skipped a sentence. The angel told Joseph to go and look in the spectacles, and you will see the man that's going to help you, to assist you. And that Joseph did that. He looks in it and he saw it's Martin Harris. He sees it in his stone in his hat.
This is, by the way, we've always said it's Alvin to Samuel to Emma, but it's not. It's Alvin to Samuel to Martin and then to Emma, or to Emma and then to Martin.
I'm putting Martin first in this.
Martin is involved as well. That struck me with surprise. I told him I wished him to be very careful about these things. Well, said he, I saw you standing before me as plainly as I do now. I said, if it is the devil's work, I will have nothing to do with it. But if it is the Lord's, you can have all the money necessary to bring it before the world. So here is Martin promising early on, you're going to get the cash if you need it. And he does. He mortgages the farm. $3,000 for 5,000 copies of the Book of Mormon. He said the angel told him that the plates must be translated, printed, and sent before the world. I said, Joseph, you know my doctrine, that cursed is every one that putteth his trust in man and maketh flesh his arm. And we know that the devil is to have great power in the latter days to deceive, if possible, the very elect. By the way, isn't it interesting that maybe some of the language Joseph Smith claims around the first vision is actually the language that Martin Harris gives him? In other words, we claim the first vision happened in 1820. Sometime in the late 1820s, Martin Harris has this conversation with Joseph where there is this idea that God is talking about what's going to happen and how Martin needs to be convinced to give money, and that God is talking to Joseph and says, is cursed is everyone that putteth his trust in man and maketh flesh his arm. And we know that the devil is to have great power in the latter days to deceive, if possible, the very elect. And I don't know that you are one of the elect. This is a conversation between Joseph and Martin is using language that Joseph will use in 1832, 35, 38, as if it happened in 1820, but it seems to be the language of Martin Harris's conversation with Smith around the actual reception and translation of the plates. I'm just noting that. It just seems interesting to me. Now, you must not blame me for taking your word. If the Lord will show me that it is his work, and then I'll just note, I end there because they go off in another direction. In the show notes, by the way, everybody, all the links that were used for researching this episode are there. There's a link that'll take you to a Google Doc, and all the sources are hyperlinked there, and you can go chase all of this down yourself. I want to give you a second to talk about this page, but I just want to say, when I read this account in the Tiffany's Monthly, it seems so obvious that there's so many treasure digging parts and so many religious narrative parts. It's like I'm watching the story turn from a treasure digging story into a religious narrative right before my eyes. And I'll just note that all the sources that are out there, when you look at people describing Joseph Smith's the earliest memories of interactions with him about the gold plates, about Moroni, there's just so much that ties into treasure digging. Moroni with the slit throat and the bloody clothes, Joseph using the seer stone perhaps to even find the plates. As you point out, RFM, Martin Harrison Smith digging multiple places looking for the plates. The use of a seer stone, a valuable treasure, precious metals buried in a hill, rituals around it, all the things black on the Moroni side with the horse and the clothes in the dark of night, and the treasure digging side with the dogs and the sheep in the dark of night. This is a treasure digging story that sometime in the mid to late 1820s started to shift into a religious narrative. And by the time we get to 1829, Mr. McGee, of course, it's going to be a religious narrative, at least in part. As you point out, RFM, it is a religious narrative at that point. It really is the witnesses, no matter how late, that are recounting their memories from the mid or early 1820s that give us the best glimpse of how Joseph articulated that story in its earliest form. And it is, in fact, a treasure digging narrative. Now, with that, I'm going to pull this next slide up and see what you had here.
Oh, here, if you can go back to the last thing we had, the last slide. I guess I could. Here we go. Yeah, when we're reading these early accounts, okay, it's like there's religion, there's the ritual magic, and they just sort of blend. It's like there's blue and there's red, but what I'm reading is kind of purple because they're blended together. It's almost seamless. The other thing I wanted to say is that in a cooper shop where you make barrels, you can have barrels that carry dry things like beans, which are handy for hiding gold plates under. And you could also have wet barrels, right? Wet cooperage for liquids, wine, whatever, oil. But if you're going to have a liquid barrel that's going to carry liquid, it's got to be very, very tight, like unto a dish. And that's hard to do in frontier America. So to get the joints that exact, and you don't really have gaskets, but what they did have was this idea was you go get cattails, you dry them out, and then you take the dried out cattails and you put them in the seams of these barrels as you're making them. And then when the liquid goes in, the cattails swell and take up that space. Okay, the reason I told you all that about the cattails, the dried cattails, and how they're used in cooperage is because the dried cattails are what are called flags. So when it says he took them out and hid them up in the chamber of the cooper shop among the flags, he's talking about the dried cattails that are kept up there.
Interesting.
That's what the next slide was.
Yeah, cool. Okay, gotcha. Flags and cooperage. Awesome. All right, we're at the end. I'm really sorry. It's 8:52. Any thoughts from you as we sort of close out the episode? I hope folks have enjoyed this.
You know, it has been a long time since I was reluctantly exposed to this type of material through D. Michael Quinn, really, back in the 1980s, and his seminal book, Early Mormonism and the Magic Worldview. And I know Dan Vogel has spent a lot of time collecting the documents and publishing them, so he's very well familiar with them. I am finally getting to a point where I am feeling somewhat comfortable with these very early documents and think I have my head around most of them to where I can make sense out of them. It's only recently that I've begun to feel that way.
Yeah, it really does require constant revisiting it and taking in all the sources and sort of looking at all of them collectively to get a feel for how much weight should be applied to those stories. Whereas, as you and I were talking about earlier, splitting it up into 100 little parts, that's how we got taught to treat it. We'd come across a source, we'd ask an apologist, they'd have a explanation. It was enough that we could set it down and move on. But when you look at all of this collectively and you go, how many people faithful and critical, are pointing to this having treasure digging, folk magic aspects, and it becomes by the end overwhelming.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, I hope it's the last thing, is about D. Michael Quinn. God bless him and rest his soul. But, even when I'm reading the book, I am doing everything I can to not listen to what he's saying. I'm reading it because I feel I should. It's an important work. Everybody's talking about it. People at farms are writing reviews about it to beat the band. I'm going to read the book, but I'm going to very conscientiously try to ignore what he's telling me. So I had to get past that, and that took forever.
Yeah. And now on this side of things, you look back and you go, D. Michael Quinn was a genius savant for collecting so much information and getting so many details. The footnotes alone are worth the price of the book.
Mm, it's true. The
Yeah.
footnotes alone, they're technically endnotes, but the endnotes alone, I think they're at least half of the book.
Mhm.
I'll show you this, okay, here in a second. Go ahead. You go ahead and you start finishing up, but
Yeah, you find them. I'll say the same thing about the origins of power and extensions of power.
yes.
That those books also, the notes were of as much or more value than the main part of the book itself.
It's basically right there is the dividing line. There's
Yeah.
pictures in the middle. That's where I was able to find that picture so quickly.
Yeah.
It's basically this is the text. These are the endnotes.
All right, folks, that's the end. I just want to know, if you please, we really do need donations. And so if anybody out there is able or willing, as time goes on, we've had people donate for years, but as time goes on, people drop off. I've had people message and say, hey, I'm 70 years old now. I've got cancer or whatever. People drop off of donations. And we really do need new people to step up and say, hey, you know what? I found you a year ago. The information you give has been really helpful. I really find the work you do to be important. If that's the case, will you please go to mormonismlive.org, click the donate button, $5 a month, $10 a month. It can be something small. If you have more substance and you can do more than that, that would be great. So much appreciated. But please, mormonismlive.org, click the donate button, make a recurring donation, $5 a month, $10 a month, whatever this show is worth to you. And RFM and I will show up week in and week out, constantly finding interesting things in Mormonism, current events, social happenings, things going on in apologetics, but in history as well. And so if this stuff is of value to you, will you please become a donor today, be a supporter of the program, join the team, join the Mormonism Live support, and donate today, and we'd be very much appreciative of that. Otherwise, like and subscribe. Tonight was a lot of fun for me to put together. I hope you enjoyed it too. Please leave your thoughts in the comments, and we'll see everybody next week, Wednesday, 6 p.m. for the next episode of Mormonism Live. Good night.
Good night.